The morning of October 12, 1985 began like any other Saturday at St. Catherine's Home for Children in Cincinnati, Ohio. The brick building, nestled in the heart of the Over-the-Rhine neighborhood, had stood for nearly 70 years, weathering economic depressions, social changes, and the shifting landscape of child welfare in America. Its red brick facade, though worn by decades of harsh Midwestern winters, still maintained a certain dignified presence on the tree-lined street. Inside, the orphanage buzzed with the familiar rhythms of weekend morning activity. In the main dining hall, a long room with high ceilings and windows that looked out onto a small courtyard, 43 children ranging from ages 5 to 17 sat at mismatched tables eating breakfast. The smell of scrambled eggs, toast, and weak coffee filled the air, mixing with the sound of cutlery against plates and the low murmur of conversation. Sister Margaret O'Brien, a woman in her early 60s with kind eyes and hands weathered by decades of service, moved between the tables with practiced efficiency. She had been the director of St. Catherine's for nearly 20 years, and in that time, she had seen hundreds of children pass through these doors. Some found families, others aged out of the system, but each one left an imprint on her heart. "Tommy, please don't throw your toast at Jennifer," she said gently but firmly to a freckled 8-year-old boy with untamed red hair. "We've talked about this." Tommy looked down at his plate, his expression a mixture of defiance and shame. "She said the Reds were going to lose today." Sister Margaret suppressed a smile. In Cincinnati, baseball wasn't just a sport. It was a religion. The Cincinnati Reds, affectionately known as the Big Red Machine during their glory years in the 1970s, held a special place in the hearts of every resident of the Queen City. Even these children, many of whom had never attended a game at Riverfront Stadium, felt a fierce loyalty to their hometown team. "The Reds are having a tough season, Tommy," Sister Margaret said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "But that's no reason to waste food or hurt others. Apologize to Jennifer." Sorry," Tommy muttered, not meeting Jennifer's eyes. Across the dining hall, 16-year-old Marcus Washington sat alone at a corner table, methodically eating his breakfast while reading a tattered copy of The Old Man and the Sea. Marcus had been at St. Catherine's longer than any other child currently in residence, nearly 11 years. He had arrived at age 5, after his mother died of complications from pneumonia, and no other family members could be found to take him in. Marcus was tall for his age, with an athletic build that he maintained through hours spent shooting hoops in the orphanage's small outdoor basketball court. His dark eyes held an intelligence and maturity that set him apart from the other children. He had learned early on that in a place like St. Catherine's, you survived by being self-sufficient, by not getting too attached, by keeping your dreams small and manageable. But Marcus had one dream he couldn't quite suppress. He wanted to play baseball, not professionally. He was realistic enough to know that was unlikely, but he wanted to play on a real team, with real uniforms and real equipment, at least once before he aged out of the system at 18. He wanted to feel what it was like to step up to the plate with teammates counting on him, to hear the crack of a wooden bat against a fastball, to run the bases with the crowd cheering. It was an impossible dream. St. Catherine's had no sports programs, no funding for equipment, and no staff with the time or expertise to coach a team. The children made do with a single basketball hoop and whatever balls and toys were donated throughout the year. A real baseball glove was as foreign to most of these kids as a trip to Disneyland. Next to Marcus sat his closest friend, 12-year-old Carmen Rodriguez. Carmen had arrived at St. Catherine's 3 years earlier after her father was imprisoned for robbery and her mother, struggling with addiction, was deemed unfit to care for her. Despite the hardships she had faced, Carmen maintained an infectious optimism and a fierce loyalty to those she cared about. "What are you reading?" Carmen asked, leaning over to look at Marcus's book. "Hemingway," Marcus replied without looking up. "It's about an old fisherman who catches a giant marlin but loses it to sharks on the way back to shore." "That sounds depressing." "It's about perseverance," Marcus said, finally meeting her eyes. "About not giving up even when everything's against you." Carmen smiled. "Like the Reds this season." Marcus couldn't help but laugh. "Exactly like the Reds this season." Outside, the October morning was crisp and clear, with golden sunlight filtering through the nearly bare branches of the oak trees that lined the street. The air carried that distinctive autumn scent, a mixture of fallen leaves, wood smoke from distant chimneys, and the promise of approaching winter. Cincinnati in October was beautiful, caught in that perfect moment between summer's heat and winter's harsh cold. At exactly 9:30 in the morning, a black Lincoln Continental pulled up to the curb in front of St. Catherine's. The car was immaculate, its paint job gleaming in the morning sun, its chrome accents reflecting the surrounding buildings. This was not the kind of vehicle typically seen in this neighborhood where most residents drove aging sedans or took the bus. The driver's side door opened, and a man stepped out. He was of average height, stocky and muscular, with a distinctive bowl haircut that was graying at the temples. He wore dark slacks, a burgundy sweater over a white-collared shirt, and expensive leather shoes. His face was weathered and tanned, with deep-set eyes that had seen both triumph and controversy. He looked around the street for a moment, taking in his surroundings, then walked purposefully toward the orphanage's front entrance. Inside, Sister Margaret was helping clean up after breakfast when one of the younger staff members, 24-year-old Hannah Brewster, rushed into the dining hall, her face flushed with excitement. "Sister Margaret! You're not going to believe who's at the front door." Sister Margaret looked up from the table she was wiping down. "Hannah, please calm down. Is someone hurt? Is there an emergency?" No, nothing like that," Hannah said, catching her breath. "It's Pete Rose. Pete Rose is at our front door, and he's asking to come in." The dining hall fell silent. Every child who was old enough to understand what Hannah had just said stopped what they were doing and stared. Pete Rose, Charlie Hustle himself, the all-time hits leader, the heart and soul of the Big Red Machine, one of the greatest baseball players to ever step onto a diamond, was at their door. Sister Margaret felt her heart skip a beat, but she maintained her composure. "Are you certain it's him?" "Positive," Hannah said. "I grew up watching him play. I'd recognize that face anywhere." Sister Margaret set down her dish rag and smoothed her habit. "Well then, I suppose we shouldn't keep Mr. Rose waiting. Children, please continue with your morning chores. I'll see what this is about." But the children had no intention of continuing with their chores. As Sister Margaret walked toward the front entrance, a small parade of curious faces followed at a respectful distance, trying to catch a glimpse of the legendary ball player. Sister Margaret opened the heavy wooden front door to find Pete Rose standing on the front steps, his hands in his pockets, looking slightly uncomfortable but determined. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the slight gray in his hair, the weathered quality of someone who had spent decades under stadium lights and in the harsh glare of media attention. "Mr. Rose," Sister Margaret said, extending her hand. "This is quite a surprise. I'm Sister Margaret O'Brien, the director of St. Catherine's. How can we help you?" Pete shook her hand firmly. His grip was strong, the hands of someone who had spent a lifetime gripping baseball bats and making diving catches. "Sister, I apologize for showing up unannounced like this. I was driving by this morning, and something told me I should stop in. I know that sounds strange." Sister Margaret studied his face for a moment. There was something genuine in his expression, a vulnerability that she hadn't expected from someone with his larger-than-life reputation. "It doesn't sound strange at all, Mr. Rose. Would you like to come in?" Pete nodded, stepping through the doorway into the orphanage's entrance hall. The interior was clean but clearly dated, with linoleum floors that had been mopped thousands of times, walls painted in institutional beige, and furniture that had seen better decades. The smell of industrial cleaner mixed with the lingering scent of breakfast. Behind Sister Margaret, a group of children had gathered, their eyes wide with wonder and disbelief. Pete Rose in their orphanage. It was like the president showing up, or Superman stepping out of a comic book. "Kids," Pete said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "How you all doing this morning?" A chorus of good and fine and nervous giggles rippled through the group. Tommy, the red-haired boy from breakfast, pushed his way to the front of the crowd. "Mr. Rose, are the Reds going to make the playoffs?" he asked with the earnest hope of childhood. Pete crouched down to Tommy's level, his knees cracking slightly with the motion. "Well, buddy, I'm going to be honest with you. This season's been tough. But you know what? That's baseball. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you never stop trying. You never stop hustling. That's what matters." Tommy nodded solemnly, as if Pete had just shared the secrets of the universe. Sister Margaret gently ushered the children back. "All right, everyone, let's give Mr. Rose some space. Back to your morning activities, please." The children reluctantly dispersed, though Marcus and Carmen lingered near the entrance to the dining hall, clearly hoping to overhear the conversation. "Can I offer you some coffee, Mr. Rose?" Sister Margaret asked, leading him toward her small office off the main hallway. "Coffee would be great, thanks. And please, call me Pete." They settled into Sister Margaret's office, a cramped room dominated by a large wooden desk covered in paperwork, file folders, and donation receipts. The walls were decorated with children's drawings, thank you notes from former residents, and a single framed photograph of Pope John Paul II. Through the window, Pete could see the small courtyard where a few children were playing on a rusty swing set. Hannah brought in 2 cups of coffee, black for Pete, with cream for Sister Margaret, and then discreetly closed the door behind her as she left. "So," Sister Margaret said, settling into her worn chair, "what brings you to St. Catherine's this morning, Pete?" Pete took a sip of coffee, then set the cup down on the edge of the desk. He seemed to be gathering his thoughts, choosing his words carefully. "I don't usually do this kind of thing without going through my agent or the team's PR department, but lately I've been thinking a lot about what matters, about legacy." Sister Margaret listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Everyone knows about the hits, the World Series championships, the records, Pete continued. But I've been playing professional baseball since I was 18 years old. I'm 44 now. For the first time in my life, I'm starting to think about what comes after baseball, and I realized something. All those hits, all those games, they're just numbers in a record book. They don't really help anybody. He paused, looking out the window at the children in the courtyard. I drove by this place this morning on my way to the stadium. I've probably driven past it 100 times and never really noticed it. But today, I saw those kids playing out there, and something just hit me. They probably don't have much, do they? Sister Margaret shook her head. We do our best with what we have. The children are fed, clothed, educated and loved. But resources are always tight. We rely entirely on donations and whatever funding we can get from the state, which, as you might imagine, is never quite enough. Pete nodded slowly. What do the kids need? I mean, beyond the basics. What would make their lives better? Sister Margaret was quiet for a moment, surprised by the directness of the question. In her 20 years at St. Catherine's, she had dealt with countless donors, well-meaning community members, and city officials. Most of them asked polite questions and made modest contributions before going about their lives. But Pete's question felt different, more personal, more sincere. Opportunities, she finally said. These children need opportunities to discover who they are, what they're good at, what brings them joy. They need to feel like they're part of something larger than themselves. Many of them struggle with feelings of abandonment, with the sense that they don't matter to anyone. Do any of them play baseball? Pete asked. Sister Margaret smiled sadly. Most of them love baseball. We're in Cincinnati after all. But we don't have the resources for a real sports program. No equipment, no coaching, no transportation to games. Marcus, one of our older boys, is passionate about the sport. He studies it, follows every game, knows statistics that would put most sportscasters to shame. But he's never played on a real team, never held a professional-grade glove or bat. Pete was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed this information. Then he stood up abruptly. Can I meet this Marcus kid? Sister Margaret rose as well. Of course. Follow me. They found Marcus in the library, a generous term for what was essentially a converted storage room, with 3 bookshelves and a handful of mismatched chairs. He was sitting by the window, still reading his Hemingway novel, with Carmen sitting across from him, working on her homework. Marcus, Sister Margaret said gently, there's someone here who'd like to meet you. Marcus looked up, and his eyes widened as he saw Pete Rose standing in the doorway. The book nearly slipped from his hands. He stood quickly, awkwardly, trying to maintain his composure, even as his heart hammered in his chest. Mr. Rose, Marcus said, his voice steady despite his nerves. It's an honor to meet you, sir. Pete walked into the room and extended his hand. Marcus shook it, noting the same firm grip that Sister Margaret had felt earlier. Sister Margaret tells me you're a baseball fan. Yes, sir. I follow the Reds. I follow all of baseball, really. I study the game. Study it how? Pete asked, genuinely curious. Marcus gestured to a stack of newspapers on the floor beside his chair. I read every game recap I can find. I keep track of statistics, analyze pitching patterns, batting averages, defensive plays. I understand the strategy of the game, when to steal, when to bunt, when to play the infield in. Pete's eyebrows rose. That's impressive. Most kids your age just want to swing for the fences. They don't think about the chess match that's happening between the pitcher and the batter, the manager and his counterpart. Baseball is the most strategic sport there is, Marcus said, warming to the topic. Every pitch is a decision point. Every player's positioning matters. It's like a puzzle that's constantly reshaping itself. Carmen had been watching this exchange with wide eyes, but now she spoke up. Marcus knows more about baseball than anyone I've ever met. He could probably manage a team if someone gave him the chance. Pete smiled at Carmen, then turned back to Marcus. Sister Margaret also tells me you've never played on a real team. Marcus's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. No, sir, we don't have... there's no program here, but I practice my swing sometimes in the courtyard with a stick and tennis balls when we have them. I imagine what it would be like. What position would you play? Pete asked. Second base, Marcus answered immediately. Like you. I know I'm tall for that position, but I've got quick hands and good reflexes. I've studied your fielding technique, the way you position yourself depending on the batter, how you turn double plays, your footwork around the bag. Pete felt something stir in his chest, a mixture of recognition and sadness. Here was a kid with genuine passion and knowledge, trapped in circumstances beyond his control, dreaming dreams that seemed impossible. Pete had been fortunate. He'd grown up in a household where baseball was encouraged, where his father had introduced him to the game and supported his ambitions. What might have happened to Pete Rose if he'd grown up in a place like St. Catherine's without access to equipment, coaching, or opportunities? Marcus, can you gather all the kids who are interested in baseball? Pete asked suddenly. I want to talk to everyone together. Marcus nodded eagerly. Yes, sir. Right away. Do. Within 15 minutes, nearly 30 children had assembled in the common room. A large space with worn couches, a television that only received 3 channels clearly, and faded posters of zoo animals and inspirational quotes on the walls. They ranged from tiny 5-year-olds to teenagers on the verge of aging out of the system. All of them looked at Pete with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Pete stood in front of them, hands in his pockets, suddenly aware of the weight of this moment. These weren't fans at Riverfront Stadium or reporters looking for a quote. These were kids who needed something real, something meaningful. "I'm going to tell you all something that most people don't know about me," Pete began. "When I was young, I wasn't the most talented player on my team. I wasn't the fastest runner, didn't have the strongest arm, wasn't the best hitter. You know what I had? I had hustle. I had the willingness to work harder than anyone else, to never give up, to run out every ground ball like it was the World Series. That's how I got the nickname Charlie Hustle." The children listened intently, hanging on every word. "Sister Margaret tells me you all love baseball but don't have the equipment or opportunity to play. Is that true?" Heads nodded throughout the room. "Well," Pete said, a smile spreading across his face, "we're going to change that. Starting today." A murmur of excitement rippled through the room. "I'm going to do more than just donate some equipment," Pete continued. "I'm going to start a baseball program here at St. Catherine's. Real uniforms, real equipment, real coaching. We're going to form a team, and I'm going to teach you how to play this game the right way. We're going to practice, we're going to work hard, and we're going to play games against other community teams. You're going to learn what it means to be part of a team, to work together toward a common goal, to support each other through wins and losses." The room erupted in cheers. Even the younger children, who didn't fully understand the significance of what Pete was saying, felt the excitement in the air. Marcus felt tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. He blinked them back, not wanting to seem weak in front of the other kids, but he couldn't suppress the smile that spread across his face. For the first time in his 11 years at St. Catherine's, something felt possible, something felt real. Sister Margaret, standing at the back of the room, felt her own eyes growing moist. She had prayed for something like this, for someone to see these children not as statistics or charity cases, but as individuals with potential, with dreams worth nurturing. She had never imagined that prayer would be answered by Pete Rose walking through her door on a random Saturday morning. "There's one condition," Pete said, his voice becoming serious. "This isn't just about baseball, it's about life. If you're going to be part of this team, you're going to have to commit to doing your best in school, treating each other with respect, and giving maximum effort in everything you do. Baseball is going to teach you discipline, teamwork, perseverance, skills that will help you succeed no matter what path you take in life. Can you all commit to that?" "Yes," the children shouted in unison, their voices echoing off the walls. "Good," Pete said, his smile returning. "Then let's get started. I'll be back next Saturday with everything we need. And Marcus," he turned to face the 16-year-old directly, "I'm going to need an assistant coach, someone who knows the game, who can help me organize practices and work with the younger kids. You interested?" Marcus felt like his heart might burst from his chest. "Yes, sir. Absolutely, yes." Pete extended his hand one more time, and Marcus shook it firmly, meeting Pete's eyes with a look of determination and gratitude that spoke volumes. As Pete prepared to leave, children crowded around him, asking questions, touching his jacket, requesting autographs on scraps of paper, napkins, or whatever they could find. He patiently signed each one, spoke to each child individually, remembering names and making genuine connections. At the door, Sister Margaret walked Pete out to his car. The morning had grown warmer, and the street was now alive with activity, neighbors going about their Saturday errands, children playing on sidewalks, the distant sound of traffic from the main thoroughfare. "Mr. Rose, Pete, I don't know what prompted you to stop here today, but I believe it was Providence," Sister Margaret said. "What you're offering these children is more than baseball equipment. You're offering them hope, dignity, and the chance to be part of something meaningful." Pete looked back at the orphanage, at the faces pressed against the windows, waving goodbye. "Sister, I've been blessed with a life in baseball that most people only dream about. If I can use that blessing to help these kids even a little bit, then maybe all those years meant something more than just statistics." He paused, then added, "I'll be back next Saturday. And sister, this isn't just a one-time thing. I'm in this for the long haul. These kids deserve that." Sister Margaret smiled. "They certainly do. And Pete, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." Pete nodded, climbed into his Lincoln Continental, and drove away. But as he navigated the streets of Cincinnati, heading toward Riverfront Stadium for an afternoon game, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose beyond the game itself. He had no way of knowing that this spontaneous decision would change not only the lives of the children at St. Catherine's, but would also profoundly impact his own life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Back at the orphanage, the children were buzzing with excitement, already forming themselves into imaginary teams, arguing over positions and dreaming of their first practice. Marcus stood at the window, watching Pete's car disappear around a corner, still holding the scrap of paper Pete had signed for him. Carmen came up beside him. "Can you believe this is really happening?" Marcus looked down at the autograph, then back up at the street. "I can't, but it is. And Carmen, I promise you something right now. I'm going to make the most of this opportunity. I'm going to work harder than I've ever worked at anything. This is our chance to be more than just orphans, more than just kids nobody wanted. This is our chance to be champions." Carmen smiled and squeezed his hand. "Then let's be champions." The following week passed with agonizing slowness for the children of St. Catherine's. Every day felt like an eternity, each night an endless stretch between them and Saturday. Marcus had transformed from the quiet, self-contained teenager who spent most of his time alone with his books into an organizing force, rallying the other children, discussing strategies, and preparing for Pete's return. On Tuesday afternoon, Marcus convened an unofficial meeting of all the kids who wanted to be part of the baseball team. They gathered in the common room after finishing their homework, a requirement Sister Margaret had insisted upon, reminding them of Pete's condition about academic commitment. "Okay, listen up," Marcus said, standing in front of the group with Carmen by his side. 28 children had shown up, ranging from 6-year-old Lily Chen, who could barely hold a bat, to 17-year-old James Porter, a lanky kid with long arms and natural athleticism. "We have 4 days until Mr. Rose comes back. We need to be ready." "Ready how?" asked Tommy, the red-haired 8-year-old. "We don't have any equipment yet." "We can start with the basics," Marcus explained. "Physical conditioning, learning the rules, understanding positions. Carmen and I are going to teach you everything we can before Saturday." Over the next several days, St. Catherine's transformed into an impromptu baseball academy. Every spare moment was devoted to preparation. Marcus led the older kids through exercises in the courtyard, sprints between imaginary bases, footwork drills, and practice swings with sticks. Carmen, who had been researching baseball in the orphanage's limited library collection, quizzed the younger children on rules and terminology. "What's an RBI?" Carmen asked Lily during one of these sessions. "Run, bat it in," Lily shouted proudly. "It means you hit the ball and someone scored because of it." "Perfect," Carmen said, high-fiving the little girl. Sister Margaret watched these preparations with a mixture of amusement and admiration. She had seen the children enthusiastic about many things over the years: holidays, special meals, visits from volunteers. But this was different. This was sustained, focused energy directed toward a common goal. The orphanage felt more alive than it had in years. On Thursday, Sister Margaret received a phone call that left her speechless. "Sister O'Brien, this is Dave Patterson from Louisville Slugger. Pete Rose called me earlier this week and placed a pretty substantial order for equipment to be delivered to your facility. I'm calling to confirm the delivery address and to let you know we're throwing in some additional items, bats, helmets, and catcher's gear, at no charge. What Mr. Rose is doing for your kids is really special and we want to be part of it." After hanging up, Sister Margaret sat at her desk for a long moment, overwhelmed by the generosity. Pete hadn't just promised to help. He was already making things happen, mobilizing resources, using his influence to benefit children he'd only met once. Friday evening, as the children were settling down for dinner, Marcus couldn't eat. His stomach was tied in knots of anticipation and anxiety. What if Pete didn't come back? What if he'd forgotten? What if this had all been some kind of dream? Carmen noticed his untouched plate. "You need to eat. You'll need your strength for tomorrow." "I can't stop thinking about what happens if this doesn't work out," Marcus admitted quietly. "These kids are so excited. If Pete doesn't show up, it'll crush them." "He'll show up," Carmen said with absolute certainty. "I saw his face when he talked to you, when he looked at all of us. That wasn't fake. He'll be here." Carmen was right. Saturday morning arrived with brilliant sunshine and unseasonably warm temperatures. At 8:30, 2 hours before Pete was scheduled to arrive, Marcus was already stationed at the front window, watching the street like a sentry. Other children gradually joined him until a small crowd had gathered, all staring out at the empty road. At exactly 10 o'clock, Pete's Lincoln Continental turned onto the street, followed by a large white moving truck with Louisville Slugger emblazoned on its side in red letters. The children erupted in cheers, pressing against the window, bouncing with excitement. Sister Margaret opened the front door as Pete climbed out of his car, wearing Cincinnati Red's warm-up gear and carrying a large duffel bag. Behind him, 2 men in Louisville Slugger uniforms began unloading boxes from the truck. "Good morning, sister," Pete said with a warm smile. "Hope you're ready for this." "I don't think any of us are truly ready," Sister Margaret replied, "but we're certainly eager." Over the next hour, the courtyard of St. Catherine's was transformed. The delivery men brought in box after box, brand new baseball gloves still smelling of leather, wooden bats of various sizes, batting helmets in the Reds' signature red and white, canvas equipment bags, dozens of baseballs, catcher's gear, bases, a pitcher's rubber, and, to everyone's amazement, complete Cincinnati Reds uniforms in sizes ranging from extra small to large. Pete had arranged for everything, but there was more. From his own car, he unloaded batting tees, training aids, a portable batting cage net, and several large containers filled with practice balls. He'd thought of everything a real baseball program would need. The children gathered around the growing pile of equipment, their eyes wide with wonder. Many of them had never owned anything new in their lives. Everything they had, clothes, toys, books, came from donation bins and thrift stores. But this equipment was pristine, professional grade, the same gear that major league players used. Tommy reached out tentatively to touch one of the gloves, then pulled his hand back as if afraid he might damage it. "Go ahead," Pete said, noticing the gesture. "Pick it up, it's yours." Tommy carefully lifted the glove, holding it like it was made of spun gold. He slipped his small hand inside, flexing his fingers in the leather pocket. A smile spread across his face so wide, it seemed his face might split in two. "We're going to spend today getting everyone fitted with the right equipment and learning the absolute basics," Pete announced to the assembled group. "Then, starting next week, we'll have practices every Saturday and Sunday afternoon. I've already arranged to use the baseball diamond at Sawyer Point Park. It's about a mile from here. Sister Margaret has agreed to help coordinate transportation." The children could barely contain themselves. Real practices at a real baseball diamond with real equipment. It seemed too good to be true. Pete organized them into groups by age. The youngest children, ages 5 to 8, would form the Little Sluggers team. The middle group, ages 9 to 12, became the Junior Reds. The oldest kids, ages 13 to 17, were designated the St. Catherine's Cardinals, and they would practice and play at a more competitive level. Marcus was assigned to work primarily with the Cardinals, serving as Pete's assistant coach. Carmen volunteered to help with the Junior Reds, particularly in teaching the fundamentals to the younger girls, several of whom had expressed interest in playing. "All right, Cardinals, let's start with the basics," Pete said, gathering the older kids around him. There were 8 of them: Marcus, James Porter, Carmen, 14-year-old twins Devon and Derek Martinez, 15-year-old Sarah Chen, Lily's older sister, 16-year-old Malcolm Rivers, and 13-year-old Ashley Thompson. Pete demonstrated proper throwing mechanics, breaking down each component of the motion: grip, stance, arm angle, follow-through. He moved with the fluidity of someone who had performed these motions millions of times, his body still remembering the muscle memory of his playing days, even though he was years past his prime. "Baseball is a game of repetition and muscle memory," Pete explained as he demonstrated a proper throwing stance. "Your body needs to know what to do without thinking about it. That only comes from practice. Thousands and thousands of repetitions. There's no shortcut." Marcus absorbed every word, every gesture, every detail. He had studied baseball intellectually for years, but seeing these techniques demonstrated by one of the game's greatest players, having the opportunity to ask questions and receive immediate feedback, was transformative. It was the difference between reading about swimming and actually jumping into the water. For the next 3 hours, the courtyard of St. Catherine's was filled with the sounds of instruction, laughter, and the pop of baseballs hitting gloves. Pete moved between the groups, offering encouragement, correcting form, and telling stories from his playing days that kept the children enthralled. "When I was with the Reds in the '75 World Series," Pete said during a water break, "we were down 3 runs in Game 7. The Red Sox had us on the ropes, but you know what? We never stopped believing we could win. We kept fighting, kept hustling, and we came back to win that championship. Baseball teaches you that no situation is hopeless if you refuse to give up." The children hung on every word, their young minds absorbing lessons that extended far beyond the baseball diamond. These weren't just stories about sports. They were lessons about perseverance, teamwork, believing in yourself when circumstances seemed overwhelming. For kids who had faced abandonment, loss, and uncertainty, these messages resonated deeply. As the afternoon wore on, Pete worked individually with each child, assessing their natural abilities and interests. He discovered that James had a strong arm and good control, making him a natural pitcher. Devon, one of the twins, had quick reflexes and sharp hand-eye coordination, potential catcher material. Sarah had surprising speed and could be developed into a solid outfielder. Malcolm, despite being slightly overweight and self-conscious about his appearance, had exceptional power in his swing. "Malcolm, you've got natural strength," Pete said, after watching the 16-year-old take a few practice swings. "We're going to work on your technique, and I guarantee you'll be hitting balls out of the park before the season's over." Malcolm's face lit up. He'd spent most of his life being picked last for every activity, dismissed as clumsy and unathletic. Having Pete Rose tell him he had potential was almost more than he could process. But it was Marcus who truly impressed Pete. The 16-year-old had clearly studied the game extensively. His knowledge of strategy was sophisticated, his understanding of situational baseball was advanced, and his work ethic was relentless. He was first to arrive for every drill, last to leave, constantly asking questions and seeking to improve. During a break, while the other kids were drinking water and joking around, Marcus approached Pete with a notebook. "Mr. Rose, I've been keeping notes on each player, their strengths, areas for improvement, what positions might suit them best. I thought it might help with planning practices." Pete took the notebook and flipped through it. Marcus had meticulously documented observations about every player on the Cardinals team, along with suggested drills and development plans. It was the work of someone who thought like a coach, not just a player. "Marcus, this is impressive," Pete said genuinely. "Have you ever thought about coaching professionally? After high school, I mean." Marcus looked down at his feet. "Mr. Rose, I age out of St. Catherine's in less than 2 years. I don't have money for college. My plan is to get a job, find a cheap apartment, and just survive. Coaching baseball seems like a dream that's way out of reach." Pete was quiet for a moment, studying the young man's face. He saw something of himself in Marcus, the hunger, the determination, the love of the game. But he also saw the weight of circumstances, the way poverty and lack of opportunity could crush dreams before they ever had a chance to develop. "Let me tell you something, Marcus. 2 years ago, people told me I was too old to keep playing, that I should retire gracefully. I didn't listen. I believed I still had something to offer, and I kept hustling. You've got 2 years before you age out. That's 2 baseball seasons. A lot can happen in 2 seasons. Don't count yourself out before the game even starts." Marcus nodded, feeling a flicker of hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "Yes, sir, I won't." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Pete gathered all the children together one final time. They sat in a semicircle around him, exhausted but exhilarated, still wearing their new gloves, some of the younger ones having refused to take them off, even for water breaks. "Today was day 1, Pete said, "and you all did great. But I want to be clear about something. This is going to be hard work. There will be days when you're tired, when your muscles ache, when you want to quit. Baseball is like that. Life is like that. The difference between people who succeed and people who fail isn't talent. It's the willingness to keep working when things get difficult." He paused, making eye contact with different children around the circle. "Every single one of you has potential. Every single one of you can learn this game and be good at it. But more importantly, every single one of you matters. You're not just orphans or kids in a difficult situation. You're ball players now. You're part of a team. And teams take care of each other." Little Lily raised her hand tentatively. "Mr. Rose, will you really come back next week?" Pete smiled warmly at the 6-year-old. "Lily, I promise you, I'll be here every Saturday and Sunday for as long as you want me here. You're stuck with me now." The children erupted in applause, some of them rushing forward to hug Pete, others holding up their gloves like trophies, all of them beaming with joy and excitement. As families of equipment were carefully stored in a converted storage room that Sister Margaret had designated as the team's equipment room, Pete pulled her aside. "Sister, I've been thinking. These kids are going to need more than just weekend practices if they're going to really develop. Would it be possible to organize some weekday practice sessions, maybe shorter ones after school?" Sister Margaret considered this. "We have limited staff, and I worry about supervision and transportation. What if I recruited some volunteers? Former players, college students, people from the community who know baseball and want to help. If you can arrange proper supervision and ensure the children's safety, I don't see why not," Sister Margaret said. "Pete, what you're doing here, it's extraordinary. These children have experienced so much loss and disappointment in their young lives. You're giving them something to believe in." Pete shook his head. "Sister, I think they're giving me something to believe in too. I've spent my whole life playing a game. It's been great, don't get me wrong. But this, seeing those kids' faces today, seeing them work together, supporting each other, this feels more important than any hit I've ever gotten." As Pete prepared to leave, Marcus approached him one more time. "Mr. Rose, I just want to say thank you. Not just for the equipment and the coaching, but for seeing us, for treating us like we matter." Pete placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You do matter, Marcus. Don't ever forget that. And hey, we've got work to do. I'm expecting you to help me whip this team into shape. Think you're up for that?" "Yes, sir," Marcus said, standing a little straighter. "I won't let you down. I know you won't." Driving home that evening, Pete felt a profound sense of satisfaction. The day had been exhausting. Teaching children with varying skill levels and attention spans was far more challenging than playing a professional baseball game. But it had also been deeply rewarding. He had given these kids something tangible, something real. And in doing so, he had discovered a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life. Over the next several weeks, the baseball program at St. Catherine's grew and evolved. True to his word, Pete recruited volunteers, former college players, baseball coaches from local high schools, even a few retired minor league players who lived in the Cincinnati area. They formed a coaching staff that could provide instruction during weekday practices, while Pete continued to lead the weekend sessions. The Cincinnati Enquirer got wind of what Pete was doing and sent a reporter to do a story. The resulting article, titled "Charlie Hustle's New Mission, Giving Hope to Orphaned Kids Through Baseball," ran on the front page of the sports section and generated significant community interest. Donations began pouring into St. Catherine's, not just money, but offers of help, transportation, food for team events, and equipment. Local businesses wanted to support the initiative. Skyline Chili offered to sponsor team dinners after games. A sporting goods store in Hyde Park donated additional equipment. Grater's Ice Cream promised free ice cream for the team after every win. The community was rallying around these children, and it was all because Pete Rose had walked through their door and decided to care. Marcus documented everything in his notebook. He tracked each player's progress, designed practice plans, studied game strategies, and read everything he could find about coaching methodology. He was learning not just how to play baseball, but how to teach it, how to inspire others, how to build a team culture. Carmen proved to be an exceptional motivator for the younger players. She had a gift for making even the most tedious drills fun, for encouraging kids when they struggled, for celebrating every small victory. Under her guidance, several girls who had never considered playing sports discovered they loved baseball and were actually quite good at it. 6 weeks after that first Saturday practice, Pete scheduled the team's first game, a friendly match against a youth team from a suburban Cincinnati community center. The Cardinals would play, with Marcus serving as assistant coach from the dugout. The night before the game, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed at St. Catherine's, staring at the ceiling, running through strategies and lineups in his mind. In the bunk below him, Malcolm was snoring softly. Across the room, James was also awake, tossing and turning with pre-game anxiety. "You awake?" James whispered into the darkness. "Yeah," Marcus replied. "Can't stop thinking about tomorrow." "We're going to get crushed, aren't we?" James said. "I mean, we've only been practicing for 6 weeks. These other teams have probably been playing for years." "Maybe," Marcus admitted. "But that's not really the point, is it? Pete keeps saying it's about the effort, the hustle, the way we play the game. Win or lose, we're going to go out there and give everything we have. That's what matters." "When did you become so wise?" James asked with a slight chuckle. "I've had a lot of time to think about things," Marcus said quietly. "This opportunity, it's bigger than baseball, James. It's about proving that we're not just throwaway kids, that we can work together, commit to something, achieve goals. Do you know how many people look at us and just see problems? Kids with no parents, no future, no value. Tomorrow we get to show them something different." The room fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence, one filled with determination and purpose rather than anxiety. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, with a chill in the November air that hinted at the approaching winter. The Cardinals assembled at St. Catherine's at noon, dressed in their full uniforms for the first time, red jerseys with St. Catherine's emblazoned across the chest in white letters, white pants, red socks, and Cincinnati Reds caps. They looked like a real team. Pete arrived in his Lincoln, followed by a van that Sister Margaret had borrowed from a local church to transport the players. Several other St. Catherine's children, who weren't on the team, including Carmen and the younger kids, piled into the van as well. They would serve as the cheering section. At Sawyer Point Park, the opposing team was already warming up. The Cincinnati Heights Wildcats were a well-established youth team with matching equipment, professional-looking gear bags, and parents filling the bleachers. They looked polished, experienced, confident. The Cardinals, by contrast, looked nervous. Most of them had never played in an actual game before. The formal atmosphere, the umpires, the spectators, the groomed diamond was intimidating. Pete gathered them in the dugout before the game. "I want you to look at me," he said firmly. "Not at them, not at the crowd, not at the scoreboard. Look at me." 8 sets of eyes focused on him. "You're going to go out there, and you're going to play your game. Their game. Don't try to be something you're not. Play fundamental baseball, make the routine plays, swing at good pitches, run hard on every ball. And no matter what happens, whether we win by 10 runs or lose by 20, you hold your heads high. You're St. Catherine's Cardinals, and you're going to show everyone here what heart looks like. Marcus, you got anything to add?" Marcus stood up, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "We've worked too hard to be afraid now. Every one of you has improved so much in 6 weeks. You've earned the right to be here. Now let's go out there and play Cardinals baseball." The team erupted in cheers, slapping hands, bumping fists, feeding off each other's energy. They took the field for the first inning with Devin behind the plate, James on the mound, Marcus at second base, Sarah in center field, Malcolm at first, Ashley at shortstop, Derek at third, and the Martinez twins' younger brother Rico in right field. James's first pitch was high and outside. His second was in the dirt. Pete could see the tension in the young man's body, the overthinking that comes from wanting too desperately to succeed. "Settle down, James," Pete called from the dugout. "Just throw strikes. Trust your defense." James took a deep breath, wound up and threw. The ball sailed over the plate, a perfect strike. The Cincinnati Heights batter swung and missed. The Cardinals' dugout erupted in cheers. The game was a learning experience, to put it mildly. The Cardinals made errors, lots of them. They struck out, chased bad pitches, threw to the wrong base. By the third inning, they were down 7-2, and frustration was setting in. But something remarkable happened in the fourth inning. Malcolm came to bat with 2 runners on base. He had struck out his first 2 at-bats, swinging wildly at pitches out of the strike zone. Pete could see the shame on his face as he walked to the plate. "Malcolm," Pete called out. "Remember what we worked on. Wait for your pitch." Malcolm nodded, setting up in the batter's box. The first pitch was outside, ball 1. The second was high, ball 2. The third pitch came down the middle, and Malcolm swung with everything he had. The crack of the bat echoed across the park. The ball soared high into the November sky, over the left fielder's head, over the fence, gone. Malcolm stood at home plate for a moment, stunned, before Marcus and the other players screamed at him to run. He circled the bases in a daze, and when he touched home plate, his entire team mobbed him, jumping and celebrating as if they'd won the World Series. In the bleachers, the St. Catherine's contingent went wild. Little Lily was jumping up and down, screaming Malcolm's name. Sister Margaret had tears streaming down her face. Even some of the Cincinnati Heights parents applauded. It was impossible not to be moved by the raw joy on these children's faces. The Cardinals didn't win the game. They lost 12-8, making numerous mistakes that a more experienced team wouldn't have made. But in that moment, the score didn't matter. They had competed, they had improved over the course of the game, and they had experienced both the agony of failure and the ecstasy of success. In the dugout after the game, Pete gathered them together one more time. "I am so proud of every single one of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You played with heart today. You didn't quit when you fell behind. You supported each other, picked each other up when you made mistakes. That's what being a team means. Malcolm, that was one of the best home runs I've ever seen, major leagues included." Malcolm beamed, still floating from the experience. "We lost today," Pete continued. "We're going to lose a lot of games this season. But I'll tell you something. I'd rather coach a team that loses with heart than a team that wins without it. You all showed tremendous heart today." Marcus spoke up from his position next to Pete. "And we're going to get better. Every practice, every game, we're going to improve. This is just the beginning." As they loaded equipment back into the van, several parents from the Cincinnati Heights team approached Pete. One of them, a man in his 40s wearing an expensive jacket, extended his hand. "Pete, I'm Dan Miller. My son plays for the Wildcats. I just wanted to say that what you're doing for these kids is incredible. If there's ever anything our organization can do to support your program, please let us know." Others echoed similar sentiments. Word was spreading throughout the Cincinnati youth baseball community about the St. Catherine's program, and there was genuine admiration for what Pete had started. That evening, back at the orphanage, the children were still buzzing with excitement. Malcolm's home run was reenacted and discussed from every possible angle. The team's defensive plays, successful and unsuccessful, were analyzed. Plans were made for how they would improve before the next game. Sister Margaret found Pete in the courtyard as the sun was setting, sitting on a bench and watching the children play catch with their new gloves. "You've changed their lives, you know," she said softly, sitting beside him. "They're changing mine," Pete replied. "I've been thinking a lot lately about legacy, about what I want to be remembered for. All my professional achievements, they're in the record books. But this feels like something that actually matters. These kids are learning lessons that will help them long after they stop playing baseball." "Marcus is a different person than he was 2 months ago," Sister Margaret observed. "He was always intelligent and capable, but he was withdrawn, guarded. Now he's a leader. He's confident. He believes in himself." "Marcus is special," Pete agreed. "That kid has something, not just baseball knowledge, but leadership ability, character, work ethic. I've been thinking about trying to help him get into college, maybe on a baseball scholarship, or at least connecting him with programs that could support kids aging out of the foster care system." Sister Margaret smiled. "You're not just coaching baseball, you're mentoring these young people. Being a father figure to kids who desperately need one." Pete was quiet for a moment. He had never married, had no children of his own. His life had been consumed by baseball, the endless games, the travel, the media attention. He had sacrificed normal relationships and family life for his career. But sitting here, watching these children who looked at him with admiration and trust, he realized he had the opportunity to be something more than just a baseball player. "Sister, I want to do more," Pete said suddenly. "The baseball program is great, but these kids need more than that. What else does St. Catherine's need? What other opportunities are these children missing out on? Sister Margaret considered the question carefully. They need education support, tutoring, college preparation, career counseling. They need exposure to different career paths, internships, mentorship. They need adults who believe in their potential and are willing to invest time in helping them succeed. Many of them have learning difficulties or trauma that affects their academic performance. They need resources we simply don't have. What if we created a comprehensive program? Pete suggested, his mind already racing with possibilities. Baseball is the foundation, but we build on it. Academic support, career exploration, college preparation, life skills training. We use sports to engage them, but we provide everything they need to succeed after they leave St. Catherine's. That would require significant resources, Sister Margaret said carefully. Funding, staff, facilities. Let me worry about that, Pete said. I know people, successful business people, former teammates, community leaders, people who would want to invest in something like this if they knew it existed. I can make this happen, sister. These kids deserve it. Sister Margaret felt tears welling in her eyes again. Pete, when you walked through our door 2 months ago, I thought you were going to donate some equipment and maybe volunteer a few times. I never imagined. Neither did I, Pete admitted. But sometimes the best things in life are the ones we don't plan. These kids walked into my life just as much as I walked into theirs, and I'm not walking away. Inside the orphanage, Marcus sat at a desk in the room he shared with 3 other boys, updating his notebook. He had pages of observations from today's game. What worked, what didn't, how each player had performed, what they needed to work on in practice. He was thinking like a coach now, seeing the game from multiple perspectives, understanding how individual improvement contributed to team success. Carmen knocked softly on the open door. "Hey, coach," she said with a smile. "Still working?" Marcus looked up. "Just finishing my notes from today's game. Carmen, we actually did it. We played a real game at a real field, wearing real uniforms. A year ago, that would have seemed impossible." "Pete made it possible," Carmen said. "No," Marcus corrected. "Pete gave us an opportunity. We made it possible by working hard and committing to it. There's a difference." Carmen sat on the edge of Malcolm's bunk. "You're going to make a great coach someday, Marcus. You have a gift for this." "I don't know about that," Marcus said modestly, "but I do know that I love it. Teaching the younger kids, watching them improve, figuring out strategies, it feels right, like this is what I'm supposed to be doing." "Then you should do it," Carmen said firmly. "Don't let circumstances stop you. Pete believes in you. Sister Margaret believes in you. I believe in you. You just need to believe in yourself." Marcus smiled. "When did you become so wise?" "I've had a lot of time to think about things," Carmen replied, echoing Marcus's words from the night before. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of the orphanage settling down for the night, children brushing teeth, Sister Margaret making her rounds, the distant hum of traffic from the street outside. "Carmen, do you ever think about what happens when we leave here?" Marcus asked quietly. "Where we'll go, what we'll do?" "All the time," Carmen admitted. "It's scary, but it's less scary now than it was before Pete, before the team. I felt like I was just floating, waiting for bad things to happen. Now I feel like I'm working towards something, like I have a purpose." "Me too," Marcus agreed. "And whatever happens, whatever comes next, I'm going to remember this. I'm going to remember that someone believed in me when he had no reason to. That someone saw potential in a bunch of orphans and decided to invest his time and energy in making us better. That means something." "It means everything," Carmen said. As winter approached and the days grew shorter and colder, the baseball program at St. Catherine's continued to develop and expand. Pete kept his promise, showing up every weekend without fail, regardless of the weather or his other commitments. The children practiced in rain, cold, and wind, their dedication never wavering. They played more games, won a few, lost more, but improved dramatically with each outing. Marcus became Pete's right hand, eventually running entire practices, while Pete observed and provided guidance. The younger teams, the Little Sluggers and Junior Reds, also flourished, with Carmen leading the charge in developing the next generation of players. But more importantly, something deeper was happening. The children were developing confidence, discipline, teamwork skills, and resilience. They were learning that failure wasn't final, that improvement came from hard work, that supporting each other made everyone stronger. These lessons extended far beyond the baseball diamond. Academic performance at St. Catherine's improved. Teachers at the local schools noticed that the children from the orphanage were more focused, more engaged, more confident. Sister Margaret noticed fewer behavioral problems, more cooperation, stronger friendships among the children. Pete had done more than start a baseball program. He had created a community, given these children a sense of identity and purpose, shown them that they mattered to someone outside the orphanage walls. It was transformative in ways that went far beyond sports, and for Pete himself, these children had become a central part of his life. He found himself thinking about them during games, wondering how Marcus was progressing with his coaching skills, whether Malcolm was keeping up with his schoolwork, if the younger kids were staying warm enough during outdoor practices. They had become, in a very real sense, his family. As the calendar turned toward December and the baseball season wound down, Pete began planning for the next phase. He would maintain the baseball program year-round, indoor training during the winter, return to outdoor practices in spring. But he also started reaching out to contacts, building support for the comprehensive youth development program he had discussed with Sister Margaret. The gift Pete Rose had left at St. Catherine's wasn't just baseball equipment or coaching. It was hope, the belief that circumstances didn't have to define destiny, that hard work and dedication could create opportunities, that every child deserved someone who believed in their potential. And for Marcus, Carmen, Malcolm, and all the other children at St. Catherine's, that gift was priceless. December in Cincinnati brought biting cold, early darkness, and occasional snow flurries that transformed the city into a monochrome landscape. The baseball diamond at Sawyer Point Park was closed for the season, its infield covered with tarps, its outfield grass brown and dormant. But Pete Rose's commitment to the children of St. Catherine's didn't hibernate with the coming of winter. On the first Saturday of December, Pete arrived at the orphanage with a surprise. Instead of his usual Lincoln Continental, he pulled up in a passenger van borrowed from a friend who owned a local business. "Everyone bundle up," he called out as the children gathered in the entrance hall. "We're taking a field trip." The children exchanged excited glances. Field trips were rare at St. Catherine's. Budget constraints meant most of their time was spent within the familiar walls of the orphanage or at the nearby public school. "Where are we going?" Tommy asked, already wearing his winter coat and Cincinnati Reds cap. "You'll see," Pete said with a mysterious smile. 20 minutes later, the van pulled into the parking lot of the Cincinnati Sports and Recreation Center, a large facility in the suburb of Mason. The building housed indoor batting cages, training equipment, basketball courts, and space for various athletic programs. "I've arranged for us to use this facility every Saturday through March," Pete announced as they climbed out of the van. "We're going to train all winter, so when spring comes, you'll be ready to dominate." The children's excited chatter filled the cold air as they filed into the warm building. Inside, Pete had reserved 2 batting cages and a large open area with equipment he'd assembled over the past week: pitching machines, training nets, agility ladders, and boxes of baseballs. "Cardinals, you're with me and Marcus in cage 1, Pete directed. "Junior Reds, Carmen's going to work with you in cage 2. "Little Sluggers, Sister Margaret and our volunteer coaches will help you with fundamentals in the open area." Over the next 3 hours, the facility echoed with the ping of aluminum bats, the thud of balls hitting nets, and the voices of children encouraging each other. Pete worked intensively with the older players, focusing on the technical aspects of hitting, weight transfer, hip rotation, bat path, follow-through. Marcus stood beside him, watching intently and offering his own observations. "James, you're dropping your back shoulder," Marcus called out. "Keep it level through the swing." James adjusted, took another swing, and connected solidly with the ball from the pitching machine. "Better," Marcus confirmed. Pete smiled, watching Marcus coach. The 16-year-old had completely transformed over the past 3 months. He moved with confidence now, spoke with authority, commanded respect from the younger players. His knowledge of the game had deepened through practical application, and his teaching ability had blossomed. During a water break, Pete pulled Marcus aside. "I've been talking to some people," he said casually. "Coaches I know, athletic directors at colleges. There are programs specifically designed to help kids from disadvantaged backgrounds get into school. Some of them offer full scholarships, tuition, room, board, everything for students who show academic potential and leadership ability." DeMarcus's heart rate quickened. "Mr. Rose, I appreciate that, but my grades are decent, not exceptional. And I don't have money for application fees, SAT prep, all that stuff." "That's why I'm helping," Pete said firmly. "Marcus, you've got something special. Not just baseball knowledge, but character, work ethic, leadership. Colleges value that. I want you to let me connect you with a counselor who specializes in helping foster youth navigate the college application process. Will you at least talk to her?" Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat. No adult outside of St. Catherine's had ever invested this much effort in his future. "Yes, sir. I'll talk to her." "Good. Her name is Dr. Patricia Chen. She's helped dozens of kids in situations like yours get into college. She'll be contacting Sister Margaret this week to set up a meeting with you." As winter deepened, the Saturday training sessions at the rec center became a cherished routine. But Pete didn't stop there. He recruited more volunteers, former players, physical trainers, even a sports psychologist who donated her time to help the children develop mental toughness and confidence. He also expanded the program beyond athletics. Every other Thursday evening, he arranged for guest speakers to visit St. Catherine's, a doctor who talked about medical careers, an engineer who brought models and explained how bridges were built, a journalist who discussed storytelling and communication, a small business owner who shared his entrepreneurial journey. I want you all to see that there are countless paths to success, Pete explained to the children. Baseball is teaching you valuable skills, but those skills can be applied to any career. Discipline, teamwork, perseverance, the ability to learn from failure. These qualities matter whether you're playing second base or performing surgery or running a company. Marcus absorbed these messages eagerly. He attended every speaker session, asked questions, took notes. He was beginning to see a future beyond St. Catherine's that involved more than just survival. A future where he could actually build a career, make a difference, maybe even come back and help other kids like himself. In mid-December, Pete organized something unprecedented, a Christmas party at his own home for the entire St. Catherine's community. His house in the upscale Indian Hill neighborhood was spacious and elegantly decorated for the holidays, with a massive Christmas tree in the living room and enough space to accommodate 43 children plus staff. The children were awestruck as they entered. Many of them had never been inside a house this nice. Pete had hired caterers to provide a feast: turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, vegetables, dinner rolls, and desserts of every variety. There were gifts for every child, thoughtfully selected based on their interests and needs. Books, sports equipment, winter clothes, educational toys. "This is too much," Sister Margaret protested quietly to Pete as she watched the children's faces light up with each unwrapped present. "It's not enough," Pete replied. "These kids deserve to feel special, to know that someone cares about them beyond just providing basic necessities. They deserve Christmas." One gift in particular stood out. When Marcus opened his present, he found a top-of-the-line laptop computer with a note attached: "For your college applications and future coaching career. You're going to need this." "Pete." Marcus stared at the laptop, unable to speak. It was the most valuable thing he'd ever owned, but more than that, it represented belief in his future, investment in his potential. He looked up to find Pete watching him. "Thank you," Marcus managed to say, his voice cracking slightly. "I don't know how to—" "You don't have to thank me," Pete interrupted. "Just promise me you'll use it to make your dreams happen. That's all the thanks I need." As the evening wound down and the children played in Pete's spacious backyard despite the cold, Sister Margaret found herself sitting in the living room with Pete, watching through the window. "You know, when you first walked into St. Catherine's, I thought you were just a celebrity doing a one-time charitable gesture," Sister Margaret admitted. "I thought you'd donate some equipment, take some photos for publicity and disappear. I'm embarrassed to say I underestimated you completely." Pete shrugged. "To be honest, I underestimated myself too. I didn't know this would become so important to me. These kids have given me a sense of purpose I didn't even know I was missing." "They talk about you constantly," Sister Margaret said. "You've become a father figure to many of them, especially the boys. Do you understand the responsibility that comes with that?" "I think so," Pete said thoughtfully. "And it's a responsibility I'm willing to accept. I'm not going anywhere, sister. These kids are part of my life now, for the long term." "What happens when the media attention dies down?" Sister Margaret asked gently. "What happens when this stops being a feel-good story and just becomes work, the daily grind of showing up, dealing with problems, handling disappointments?" Pete turned to face her directly. "Then I keep showing up. Sister, I'm not doing this for media attention. I'm doing this because it matters, because these kids matter. I've spent my whole life chasing statistics and records. This is the first time I've done something that actually helps people. That's not going away when the cameras stop rolling." Sister Margaret smiled. "I believe you, Pete, and I'm grateful beyond words for what you're doing." The following week, Marcus met with Dr. Patricia Chen, the college counselor Pete had connected him with. She was a sharp, energetic woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes that missed nothing. They met in Sister Margaret's office, and Dr. Chen spent 2 hours asking Marcus about his interests, his goals, his academic record, his life story. She reviewed his transcripts, discussed his test scores, and asked him to write a practice essay about a significant experience in his life. "Marcus, you're a strong candidate," Dr. Chen said at the end of the meeting. "Your grades are solid, your SAT scores are above average, and your personal story is compelling. More importantly, you've demonstrated leadership and initiative through your work with the baseball program. Those qualities matter to admissions committees." "But I don't have money," Marcus said bluntly. "Even with scholarships, how would I afford books, transportation, living expenses?" "That's what we're going to figure out together," Dr. Chen replied. "There are programs specifically designed for youth aging out of foster care, full support systems that cover everything. And Pete has offered to personally fund anything that scholarships and programs don't cover. You're not going to let money stop you from getting an education, Marcus. I won't allow it." Marcus felt hope blooming in his chest, fragile but real. What do I need to do? Work hard, keep your grades up, and trust the process, Dr. Chen said. I'm going to help you identify schools that would be a good fit, places with strong education programs, since I understand you're interested in coaching and working with young people. We'll start preparing your applications after the holidays. When Dr. Chen left, Marcus sat alone in Sister Margaret's office for a long time, processing everything. A year ago, his future had seemed predetermined. Age out of St. Catherine's at 18, find minimum wage work, rent a cheap room somewhere and just exist. Now suddenly, college seemed possible. A career seemed possible. A life beyond mere survival seemed possible. And it was all because Pete Rose had decided to walk through their door on a random Saturday morning. As January arrived, bringing with it brutal cold and heavy snowfall, the rhythm of life at St. Catherine's had fundamentally changed. The children had structure and purpose. They had goals to work toward. They had an adult who consistently showed up and demonstrated through actions, not just words, that they mattered. The weekly training sessions continued without interruption. Pete drove through snowstorms, rescheduled professional commitments, and showed up exhausted after long days. But he always showed up, and the children noticed. They learned that reliability wasn't just a word, that commitment meant following through even when it was difficult, that being part of a team meant being there for each other no matter what. One particularly brutal Saturday in late January, the temperature barely reached 10 degrees. Several of the volunteer coaches had called to cancel, and Pete arrived at St. Catherine's to find only about half the usual number of kids ready to go to the rec center. "Where is everyone?" Pete asked Sister Margaret. "Some of the children are feeling under the weather, and honestly, I think some of them just decided it was too cold," she admitted. "I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to cancel today's session." Pete shook his head. "The kids who showed up deserve a full practice. They made the effort to be here, and I'm going to make the effort to coach them. That's what commitment means." The reduced group piled into the van: Marcus, Carmen, Malcolm, James, Sarah, and a handful of the younger children. At the rec center, Pete worked with them intensively, giving each child more individual attention than usual. "This is what separates good players from great ones," Pete told them during a break. "Great players show up even when it's cold, even when they're tired, even when it would be easier to stay home. They find a way to push through discomfort because they're committed to something bigger than themselves." Marcus listened carefully, mentally filing away this lesson. It wasn't just about baseball, it was about life, about character, about the kind of person you chose to become. On the drive back to St. Catherine's, Malcolm spoke up from the back of the van. "Mr. Rose, can I ask you something?" "Sure, Malcolm, what's on your mind?" "Why do you keep doing this? I mean, you're Pete Rose. You're famous, you're rich, you have other things you could be doing. Why spend your Saturdays with a bunch of orphans?" The van fell silent. All the children were listening, curious about Pete's answer. Pete was quiet for a moment, considering his response. "Malcolm, for a long time, I thought baseball was the most important thing in my life. And it is important, it's given me everything I have. But you know what? Helping you guys, watching you improve and gain confidence, seeing you support each other, that feels more important than any game I ever played. You're not just a bunch of orphans. You're young people with potential, with dreams, with the ability to do amazing things if someone gives you a chance. I show up because you matter, because all of you deserve someone who believes in you." Carmen wiped tears from her eyes. Tommy, the red-haired 8-year-old, reached forward from his seat and grabbed Pete's shoulder. "We believe in you too, Mr. Rose." Pete felt his own eyes growing moist. "Thanks, buddy. That means a lot." As February arrived, Pete implemented a new component to the program that surprised everyone. He announced that every player who maintained a B average or better in school would receive one-on-one mentoring sessions with him. Not about baseball, but about life planning, goal setting, and career exploration. "Baseball is a vehicle," Pete explained to the group. "It's teaching you discipline and teamwork, but those skills need to translate into success beyond the field. I want to help each of you figure out what you're passionate about and how to build a future around it." Marcus was, of course, the first to take advantage of this opportunity. He and Pete began meeting every Thursday evening at a diner near St. Catherine's, where they would talk over coffee and pie about Marcus's college plans, his interest in coaching, and his fears about the future. "I keep thinking about all the kids who are going to come through St. Catherine's after I leave," Marcus said during one of these sessions. "Kids like me who love baseball but don't have access to programs or opportunities. What happens to them after after the program?" He trailed off, uncomfortable finishing the thought. "After I'm gone?" Pete finished for him. "Marcus, that's exactly why I need people like you to become coaches and educators. You understand these kids in a way I never could. You've lived their experience. You know what they need." The work I'm doing here isn't going to end with me. It's going to continue through people like you who take what they've learned and pass it on to the next generation. But what if I'm not good enough? Marcus asked quietly. What if I get to college and realize I don't belong there? What if I fail? Pete leaned forward, his expression serious. Let me tell you something about failure, Marcus. I've failed thousands of times, struck out, made errors, lost games. The difference between people who succeed and people who don't isn't whether they fail, it's whether they get back up after failing. You're going to struggle in college. You're going to have classes that are hard, moments when you doubt yourself, times when you want to quit, but you're also going to remember everything you've overcome to get there. You're going to remember that you survived losing your mother, growing up in an orphanage, facing uncertainty every single day. If you can survive that, you can survive a difficult chemistry class or a tough semester. Marcus nodded slowly, letting these words sink in. Thank you, Mr. Rose, for everything. I don't think you realize how much you've changed my life. I think I do, Pete said with a gentle smile. And Marcus, you've changed mine too. Never forget that. Meanwhile, Carmen had been developing her own path. Through one of Pete's guest speakers, a social worker who had visited St. Catherine's, she had discovered a passion for helping others navigate difficult circumstances. She began volunteering at a local community center, working with younger children who came from troubled backgrounds. I want to be someone who helps kids like us, Carmen told Sister Margaret one evening. Someone who understands what it's like to feel abandoned or forgotten. Someone who can use that experience to make a difference. Sister Margaret hugged the 12-year-old tightly. Carmen, you already are making a difference. The way you work with the younger children on the baseball team, the encouragement you give them, the patience you show, you're a natural helper. And with the right education and training, you could have an incredible career helping others. Pete connected Carmen with Dr. Chen as well, even though she was several years away from college. It's never too early to start planning, he told her. And I want to make sure you have the same opportunities Marcus has. The younger children were also thriving. Tommy, the red-haired boy who had thrown toast on that first morning Pete visited, had become one of the most improved players in the entire program. His natural competitiveness and boundless energy, once channeled into disruptive behavior, now fueled his athletic development. He was fast, aggressive on the base paths, and had developed surprising power at the plate for his size. Malcolm, the overweight teenager who had once been painfully self-conscious, had shed 20 pounds through the rigorous training program and had gained confidence that extended far beyond baseball. His grades had improved dramatically, and he was now talking about studying sports medicine in college, a goal that would have seemed laughable to him 6 months earlier. Even little Lily, at just 6 years old, had discovered that she loved playing catcher, a position typically reserved for boys, but one where her fearlessness and quick reflexes served her well. Pete had personally worked with her to find protective gear that fit properly and had praised her toughness in team meetings, earning her respect from the older players. By late February, the Cardinals had developed into a genuinely competitive team. They had played 10 indoor games against other youth teams during the winter months and had won 4 of them, a dramatic improvement from their early season record. More importantly, they had developed the intangible qualities that defined championship teams: resilience, communication, trust, and collective determination. One cold Saturday, Pete received unexpected visitors at the rec center. 3 men in expensive suits walked in during practice, and he recognized them immediately. They were executives from the Cincinnati Reds organization, including the team's general manager. Pete, we've been reading about what you're doing here, the GM said after introductions. The organization would like to offer formal support for your program. We want to make St. Catherine's one of the Reds' official community partners. That means funding, access to Riverfront Stadium for practices and games, appearances by current players, and inclusion in our youth baseball network. Pete was stunned. That's incredible. These kids would have access to the stadium. Not just access, another executive chimed in. We want to host a special game at Riverfront, St. Catherine's Cardinals versus an all-star team from our youth league. We'll promote it, fill the stands, give these kids the experience of playing on a major league field. What do you say? Pete looked across the batting cage at Marcus, who was working with James on his pitching mechanics. He thought about Malcolm's home run, about Tommy's speed on the base paths, about Lily's fearlessness behind the plate. He imagined these children running onto the field at Riverfront Stadium, wearing their uniforms, hearing cheers from thousands of fans. When? Pete asked. Opening day of youth baseball season, first Saturday in April. That gives you about 6 weeks to prepare. Pete extended his hand. We'll be ready. When Pete shared the news with the children, the reaction was explosive. They screamed, jumped, hugged each other, some of them crying with joy. Playing at Riverfront Stadium, the home of the Big Red Machine, the place where Pete Rose had become a legend, was beyond their wildest dreams. "We're going to work harder than we've ever worked," Marcus told the Cardinals team in an impromptu meeting after practice. "This is the opportunity of a lifetime, and we're going to make the most of it. Everyone needs to commit to giving maximum effort at every practice from now until April. Can I get that commitment from everyone?" Every hand went up. Over the next 6 weeks, the intensity of training increased dramatically. Pete brought in additional coaches, added extra practice sessions, and worked individually with each player on their specific weaknesses. The children responded with the kind of dedication that would have impressed professional athletes. Marcus became obsessed with preparation. He created detailed scouting reports on their opponents, designed practice drills specifically tailored to counter their strengths, and held extra film sessions where he broke down game footage with the older players. He was operating at a level that rivaled professional coaching staffs. Dr. Chen, who had been working with Marcus on his college applications, was amazed by his transformation. "Marcus, you've matured 10 years in 6 months, she told him during one of their meetings. "The leadership skills you're demonstrating, the strategic thinking, the ability to motivate others, these are qualities that college admissions committees look for in candidates. Your essays about this experience are extraordinary." In early March, Dr. Chen delivered news that left Marcus speechless. "I've been in contact with the education department at Xavier University here in Cincinnati. They have a program specifically for students interested in teaching and coaching, and they offer full scholarships for exceptional candidates from disadvantaged backgrounds. Marcus, they want to interview you for one of these scholarships." Marcus felt dizzy. Xavier University was a respected institution with an excellent education program. "What do I need to do?" "Just be yourself," Dr. Chen said. "Tell them your story, share your passion for coaching and working with young people, and let them see the person I see. Someone with extraordinary potential who has overcome significant obstacles." The interview took place on a rainy March afternoon in a conference room on Xavier's campus. Marcus wore a suit that Pete had bought him for the occasion, the first suit he had ever owned. Across from him sat 3 professors and the director of admissions, all reviewing his application materials. "Marcus, tell us why you want to become a teacher and coach," the department chair asked. Marcus took a deep breath and began to speak. He told them about growing up at St. Catherine's, about watching baseball games on the orphanage's old television and dreaming of playing someday. He described the morning Pete Rose walked through their door and how that single act of generosity had transformed not just his life, but the lives of 43 children. He talked about discovering his passion for coaching, for teaching others, for taking his own difficult experiences and using them to help young people who faced similar challenges. "I want to be for other kids what Pete Rose has been for me," Marcus said, his voice steady and confident. "I want to show them that their circumstances don't define their potential. I want to teach them that with hard work, dedication, and someone who believes in them, they can achieve things that seem impossible. That's why I want to become a coach and educator." The room was silent for a moment. Then the admissions director smiled. "Marcus, pending your graduation from high school and maintaining your current grades, we would like to offer you a full scholarship to Xavier University's education program, including housing, books, and a monthly stipend for living expenses. We believe you're exactly the kind of future educator our program exists to develop." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. "Thank you," he managed to say. "Thank you so much. I won't let you down." "We know you won't," the department chair said warmly. "We'll see you in the fall, Marcus." When Marcus returned to St. Catherine's that evening, he was still in a daze. He found Sister Margaret in her office and shared the news. She embraced him, both of them crying tears of joy. "I knew you could do it," she said. "I always knew you had something special, Marcus." "I couldn't have done it without Pete," Marcus said. "He saw something in me I didn't see in myself. He gave me opportunities I never would have had. He changed my life, Sister Margaret." That evening, when Pete arrived for a practice session, Marcus pulled him aside and shared his news. Pete's face broke into the widest smile Marcus had ever seen on him. "I'm so proud of you," Pete said, pulling Marcus into a hug. "This is just the beginning, Marcus. You're going to do incredible things. You're going to help so many kids." "Because you helped me," Marcus said. "I want you to know that I'm going to pay this forward. Everything you've taught me, everything you've given me, I'm going to pass it on to others. That's a promise." "I know you will," Pete said. "And Marcus, don't forget about us when you become a famous college coach." Marcus laughed through his tears. "Never. You and St. Catherine's, your family, that doesn't change." As March progressed and April approached, the excitement about the Riverfront Stadium game reached fever pitch. Local media had picked up the story, and the Cincinnati Enquirer ran a front-page feature about the St. Catherine's program and the upcoming game. The article detailed Pete's involvement, the children's transformation, and the broader impact the program was having on their lives. The story resonated throughout Cincinnati. Donations poured into St. Catherine's. Local businesses wanted to sponsor the team. Former professional players volunteered to help with training. The city was rallying around these children in a way that none of them had experienced before. 1 week before the game, Pete organized a special dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown, his treat for the entire Cardinals team. The children, dressed in their best clothes, sat around a long table, enjoying food most of them had never tasted before. "I want to talk to you all about next Saturday," Pete said once the meal was finished. "You're going to walk onto that field at Riverfront Stadium, and there are going to be thousands of people watching you. The media will be there. It's going to be intense. Some of you might feel nervous or overwhelmed." The children listened intently. "Here's what I want you to remember. You've earned this. You've worked incredibly hard. You've improved more in 6 months than most players improve in years. You deserve to be on that field. And no matter what happens in the game, whether you win or lose, whether you play great or make mistakes, you hold your heads high. You're St. Catherine's Cardinals, and you represent something bigger than baseball. You represent hope, resilience, determination. You represent proof that every kid deserves a chance regardless of where they come from." Malcolm raised his hand. "Mr. Rose, what if we mess up? What if we embarrass ourselves in front of all those people?" Pete smiled gently. "Malcolm, do you remember your first at-bat in your first game? You struck out swinging at 3 pitches that weren't even close to the strike zone." Malcolm nodded, blushing slightly. "And do you remember your last at-bat in that same game?" "I hit a home run," Malcolm said quietly. "Exactly. You went from striking out to hitting a home run in the same game. That's baseball. That's life. We all mess up sometimes. What matters is how we respond. If you make an error, you focus on the next play. If you strike out, you prepare for your next at-bat. You never give up, you never stop hustling, and you support your teammates no matter what. That's all anyone can ask of you." As the dinner concluded and the children loaded back into the vans for the ride home, Pete stood outside the restaurant with Sister Margaret, watching the kids laugh and joke with each other. "You've built something truly special here," Sister Margaret said. "These children have changed so much. They have confidence, purpose, dreams. Marcus is going to college. Carmen is planning to become a social worker. Malcolm has lost weight and gained self-esteem. Tommy has channeled his energy productively. Even the youngest children, they carry themselves differently now. They believe they matter. They do matter," Pete said firmly. "Every single one of them. And sister, this is just the beginning. After the game at Riverfront, I want to expand the program even further. I've been talking with other orphanages and foster care organizations around Cincinnati. There are hundreds of kids like those at St. Catherine's who could benefit from this kind of program. I want to create a foundation, make this sustainable and scalable, reach as many children as possible." Sister Margaret smiled. "Pete Rose, patron saint of orphans. Who would have imagined?" Pete laughed. "Certainly not me 6 months ago. But I guess sometimes life takes you in unexpected directions. And sometimes those unexpected directions turn out to be exactly where you were supposed to go all along." The night before the big game, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing through every possible scenario. Tomorrow, he would step onto the field at Riverfront Stadium, the same field where Pete Rose had gotten his 4,192nd hit, breaking Ty Cobb's all-time record. The same field where the Big Red Machine had dominated baseball in the 1970s. The same field he had watched countless times on television, never imagining he would actually play there. "You awake?" James whispered from across the room. "Yeah," Marcus replied. "You?" "Too nervous to sleep. This is crazy, right? Us playing at Riverfront?" "Completely crazy," Marcus agreed, "but we're ready. We've worked so hard for this." "Marcus," James said quietly, "I want to thank you for everything you've done as assistant coach. You've made me a better player, but more than that, you've shown me what leadership looks like. You've shown all of us what it means to commit to something, to work for a goal, to never give up." Marcus felt emotion welling up in his chest. "We've done this together, James. All of us. We're a team." "No," James said firmly. "You and Pete, you two changed everything. Before this program, I was just counting down the days until I aged out of here. I had no plan, no hope, no future. Now I'm thinking about playing baseball in high school, maybe even getting a college scholarship. I have dreams again, Marcus. That's because of you." "And Pete," Marcus added. "And Pete," James agreed. "But don't sell yourself short. You're going to be an amazing coach someday, and when you are, I hope you remember us, the first team you ever coached." "I'll never forget," Marcus said. "Not any of this, not ever." April 4th, 1986, dawned clear and bright over Cincinnati. The Ohio River sparkled in the morning sun, and Riverfront Stadium stood like a concrete cathedral along its banks, its distinctive circular shape dominating the downtown skyline. Inside the locker rooms, typically reserved for professional athletes, the St. Catherine's Cardinals were getting ready for the most important game of their young lives. Pete had arranged for them to use the actual Reds' home clubhouse, and the children walked through the tunnel in stunned silence, looking at the lockers where their heroes dressed, the training facilities where professional players prepared, the batting cages where legends had honed their swings, their uniforms hung in the lockers, each one with a player's name stitched across the back. For many of them, it was the first time they had ever seen their own names on anything so official, so professional. Marcus stood in front of his locker, staring at the jersey that read Washington 7 across the back. His jersey number was 7, Pete Rose's number. Pete had chosen it specifically for him. "Pretty surreal, isn't it?" Pete said, appearing beside him. "I don't even have words," Marcus admitted. 6 months ago, I was just another kid at an orphanage with no future, no prospects. Now I'm standing in the Cincinnati Reds clubhouse, about to play a game on their field, with a college scholarship waiting for me in the fall. It doesn't feel real." "It's real," Pete assured him. "And you earned every bit of it, Marcus. Your hard work, your dedication, your leadership, that's what made this possible. I just opened a door. You walked through it and ran." Pete addressed the team before they took the field, standing in the center of the clubhouse, while 28 children, the Cardinals, the Junior Reds, and the Little Sluggers, gathered around him. "In about 15 minutes, you're going to run out of that tunnel onto the field," Pete said. "And when you do, there are going to be over 10,000 people in the stands cheering for you, not for me, not for the Reds, but for the St. Catherine's Cardinals. You're going to feel nervous, excited, maybe a little scared. That's normal. That's what every player feels before a big game." He paused, making eye contact with children around the circle. "But here's what I want you to remember. You're not here by accident. You're not here because someone felt sorry for you. You're here because you worked your tails off for 6 months, because you committed to something bigger than yourselves, because you became a team. Every early morning practice, every cold Saturday, every drill you ran until your muscles ached. It was all building to this moment." Tommy raised his hand. "Mr. Rose, what if we lose really bad?" Pete smiled. "Tommy, winning and losing, those are just outcomes. They're not what define you. What defines you is how you play. Do you give maximum effort? Do you support your teammates? Do you handle adversity with grace? Do you celebrate success with humility? Those are the things that matter. If you do all that and lose, you're still winners. If you forget all that and win, you've lost something more important than a game." He looked around the circle one more time. "Cardinals, put your hands in. Everybody together now." 28 hands stacked in the center of the circle. "What are we?" Pete shouted. "Cardinals!" the children roared back. "What do we do?" "Hustle! On 3. 1, 2, 3. Cardinals!" The sound echoed through the clubhouse, and then they were moving, flowing through the tunnel toward the field. Marcus walked beside Pete, his heart hammering in his chest, adrenaline surging through his veins. They emerged from the tunnel into brilliant sunshine and a wall of sound. Over 10,000 people packed the stands, and when the St. Catherine's Cardinals appeared, the crowd erupted in applause. Signs and banners were everywhere. "We believe in you, Cardinals. Pete Rose's kids. From St. Catherine's to the big leagues. Hustle like Pete." Little Lily, bringing up the rear of the line, stopped dead in her tracks, overwhelmed by the noise and the crowd. Carmen, walking beside her, took her hand. "It's okay, Lily. They're cheering for us. They're on our side." Lily nodded, squeezing Carmen's hand, and continued walking. The Cardinals spread out across the field for warm-ups, and Marcus tried to focus on routine, throwing, catching, fielding ground balls, but his mind kept being pulled to the grandeur of it all. He was standing on the same dirt where Johnny Bench had crouched behind the plate, where Joe Morgan had turned double plays, where Pete Rose had dove headfirst into bases thousands of times. In the stands, Sister Margaret sat with the younger children who weren't playing in this game, along with staff from St. Catherine's and dozens of volunteers who had supported the program over the past 6 months. She watched her children taking the field and felt tears streaming down her face. These were the same kids who, 6 months ago, had seemed destined for difficult lives filled with struggle and disappointment. Now they were playing baseball at Riverfront Stadium, cheered by thousands, their futures bright with possibility. The opposing team, a select all-star squad from the Cincinnati Youth Baseball League, took the field for their warm-ups. They were talented, experienced players who had been competing at high levels for years. By any objective measure, they should have dominated the Cardinals. But baseball, as Pete had taught his team, wasn't played on paper. The game began with James on the mound for the Cardinals. His first pitch was high and tight, and the crowd groaned. His second was in the dirt. Pete could see the tension in the young man's body, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "Time!" Pete called, jogging out to the mound. Marcus joined him. "James, look at me," Pete said calmly. "You're thinking too much. You're trying to be perfect. Nobody's perfect, especially not in baseball. Just throw the ball like we've practiced 1,000 times. Trust your defense. Trust yourself." "There are so many people watching," James said, his voice shaking slightly. "Then give them something worth watching," Marcus said. "Show them what you're made of. Show them that a kid from St. Catherine's can compete with anyone." James took a deep breath, nodded, and Pete and Marcus jogged back to the dugout. The next pitch was a perfect strike on the outside corner. The following pitch was a changeup that the batter swung through. 2 pitches later, James had his first strikeout, and the Cardinals' dugout erupted in celebration. The game was tight throughout. The All-Star team scored first, taking a 2-0 lead in the second inning. But the Cardinals fought back. Marcus led off the bottom of the third with a single, stole second base on the first pitch, and scored when Sarah hit a line drive into the gap in left center field. The crowd went wild, and Sarah stood on second base with tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the moment. In the fourth inning, Malcolm came to bat with runners on first and second. The All-Star team's pitcher was throwing hard, and Malcolm had already struck out twice. Pete could see the frustration on his face. "Malcolm," Pete called from the dugout, "remember what we worked on? Wait for your pitch." Malcolm stepped into the batter's box, adjusted his stance, and waited. The first pitch was high, ball 1. The second was outside, ball 2. The third pitch came down the middle, and Malcolm swung. The crack of the bat was unmistakable. The ball soared high into the Cincinnati sky, over the left field wall, into the seats. A 3-run home run. Malcolm rounded the bases in a dream state, and when he touched home plate, his entire team swarmed him, jumping, shouting, celebrating like they'd won the World Series. The scoreboard showed Cardinals 4, All-Stars 2. But the All-Star team wasn't finished. They scored 3 runs in the 6th inning, retaking the lead 5-4. The Cardinals came to bat in the bottom of the 7th, their final chance, needing at least 1 run to tie. Devon led off with a walk. Ashley struck out swinging. Derek hit a ground ball to second base, and for a moment it looked like a double play. But Derek ran so hard down the baseline that he beat the throw to first. 2 on, 1 out. Tommy stepped to the plate, the red-haired 8-year-old who had asked Pete if the Reds would make the playoffs that first morning, 6 months ago. He was facing a pitcher 4 years older, throwing at least 10 miles per hour faster than anything Tommy had seen before. The first pitch was a fastball right down the middle. Tommy swung and missed. The second pitch was another fastball, and Tommy fouled it off. 0-2 count. The crowd was on its feet, roaring encouragement. Pete called time and walked to the on-deck circle where Tommy was waiting. "Tommy, he's going to throw you another fastball. He thinks you can't catch up to it. But you can. I've seen you do it 100 times in practice. Trust your swing. Be quick to the ball." Tommy nodded, his freckled face set with determination. He stepped back into the batter's box. The pitcher wound up and threw. Tommy's bat whipped through the zone, and he made contact, a line drive into right field. Devon scored easily from second. Derek, running on contact, rounded third and headed home. The throw came in from right field. It was going to be close. Derek slid headfirst into home plate, Pete Rose style, hustling all the way, and the umpire spread his arms wide. Safe! The game was tied, 5-5. Tommy stood on first base, jumping up and down, his teammates screaming his name from the dugout. 3 batters later, the Cardinals had the bases loaded with 2 outs, and Marcus came to the plate. This was the moment he had dreamed about for years. Bases loaded, game on the line, standing at home plate in a real stadium with thousands of people watching. Time seemed to slow down. Marcus looked out at the pitcher, then glanced toward the dugout where Pete stood, arms folded, a slight smile on his face. Pete gave him a small nod, and suddenly Marcus felt calm. He had prepared for this. He was ready. The first pitch was a ball, outside. The second was a strike on the corner. The third pitch was a fastball, middle in, and Marcus swung. The ball rocketed into left center field, splitting the outfielders. Devon scored, Tommy scored. Ashley, who had reached base on an error, scored. Marcus pulled into second base with a 3-run double, and the Cardinals had taken an 8-5 lead. Riverfront Stadium shook with the roar of the crowd. In the stands, Sister Margaret was on her feet, crying and cheering. The younger children were jumping up and down, screaming Marcus's name. Pete stood in the dugout, watching Marcus stand on second base with his arms raised in triumph, and felt a lump in his throat. This was why he had walked into St. Catherine's that October morning. This moment, this joy, this proof that these children could achieve extraordinary things when given the opportunity, this was what mattered. The Cardinals held on to win, 8-7. When the final out was recorded, a pop-up to Marcus at second base, the entire team rushed the mound, piling on top of each other in celebration. The crowd gave them a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. After the post-game ceremonies, where each player received a commemorative baseball and certificate, the team gathered in the clubhouse. They were exhausted, exhilarated, still processing what had just happened. Pete stood before them one final time that day. "I am so incredibly proud of every single one of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You played with heart, with hustle, with class. You supported each other. You never gave up. You showed everyone watching that you are champions, not because you won a game, but because of how you played it, how you carried yourselves, how you represented St. Catherine's and everything this program stands for. He paused, collecting himself. But here's the thing, this isn't the end. This is just the beginning. You're going to go back to St. Catherine's tomorrow, and then you're going to wake up Monday morning and go to school. You're going to do your homework, practice your skills, work toward your goals. Because being a champion isn't about one game or one moment. It's about how you live your life every single day. Marcus stepped forward. Mr. Rose, on behalf of the entire team, I want to thank you. 6 months ago, most of us didn't believe we'd ever amount to anything. We thought we were just orphans, kids nobody wanted, destined for hard lives. You showed us we were wrong. You taught us that with hard work, dedication, and someone who believes in us, we can achieve things we never thought possible. You didn't just teach us baseball, you taught us how to believe in ourselves. We will never forget that. Never. The entire team applauded, and several of the younger children ran to Pete, hugging him. He embraced them, these children who had become his family, feeling more fulfilled than he had ever felt hitting a baseball or winning a championship. That evening, after the children had returned to St. Catherine's and the excitement had finally begun to settle, Pete sat alone in the empty Riverfront Stadium clubhouse. He thought about the journey that had led him here, from a working-class neighborhood in Cincinnati to the heights of professional baseball, and now to this unexpected role as a mentor and father figure to orphaned children. His entire life, he had been defined by his statistics, the hits, the records, the championships. But sitting in that quiet clubhouse, he realized that those numbers, as impressive as they were, would pale in comparison to the impact he had made on these children's lives. Marcus would go to college and become a coach, influencing countless young people. Carmen would become a social worker, helping children navigate difficult circumstances. Malcolm would pursue sports medicine. Tommy would carry the lesson of hustle and determination into whatever path he chose. And all of them, every child who had been part of this program, would remember that someone had believed in them, had invested in their potential, had shown them they mattered. That was a legacy worth more than any record book. A security guard poked his head into the clubhouse. "Mr. Rose, we're closing up soon." "I'm heading out," Pete said, standing and taking one last look around the room where, just hours earlier, his Cardinals had prepared to play the game of their lives. As he walked through the empty stadium, Pete Rose smiled. He had no way of knowing that this day would become one of the defining moments of his life, that the St. Catherine's program would grow into a foundation serving thousands of at-risk youth across the country, or that 20 years later, Marcus Washington would return to Riverfront Stadium, by then renamed Great American Ballpark, as the head coach of a major college baseball program, crediting everything he had achieved to the man who had walked into an orphanage unannounced and changed his life forever. All Pete knew in that moment was that he had found something more important than baseball. He had found purpose. And for Charlie Hustle, that was the greatest victory of all. 3 months after the triumphant game at Riverfront Stadium, life at St. Catherine's had settled into a new normal, one fundamentally different from the orphanage's previous existence. The baseball program was now a permanent fixture, with practices continuing through the spring and summer. But more significantly, Pete's vision of a comprehensive youth development program was taking shape. The success of the St. Catherine's Cardinals and the publicity surrounding the Riverfront game had attracted attention from across Cincinnati and beyond. Philanthropists, former athletes, educators, and community leaders reached out to Pete, wanting to support or replicate the program. Within weeks, Pete found himself at the center of something much larger than he had initially envisioned. In late June, Pete formally established the Charlie Hustle Foundation for At-Risk Youth, with Sister Margaret serving on the board of directors and Marcus, despite still being in high school, appointed as a youth advisor. The foundation's mission was to provide comprehensive support for children in foster care and orphanages, using athletics as a vehicle for teaching life skills, building confidence, and creating opportunities. The foundation's first office was a modest space in downtown Cincinnati, staffed by volunteers and one part-time administrator. But the impact was immediate. Within the first 3 months, the foundation had expanded the baseball program to 4 additional orphanages and group homes around Cincinnati, provided college preparation services for over 50 at-risk youth, and created a mentorship network connecting successful professionals with children aging out of foster care. Marcus spent the summer before his final year of high school working at the foundation as an intern, his first real job. He helped develop curriculum, trained new volunteer coaches, and shared his story at fundraising events. Watching him speak to rooms full of potential donors, Pete was continually amazed by the young man's poise and eloquence. "When I was 14, I didn't believe I would live to see 18, Marcus told an audience of business leaders at one such event. I didn't see the point in planning for a future that seemed impossible. Then Pete Rose walked through our door and taught us that impossible is just another word for something we haven't achieved yet. The work this foundation does, it's not charity, it's investment. You're investing in young people who will take what they learn and pay it forward, creating a ripple effect that extends far beyond anything we can measure today. The room erupted in applause, and by the end of the evening, the foundation had raised over $50,000. Carmen, now 13 and increasingly focused on her goal of becoming a social worker, volunteered with the foundation's mentorship program. She was paired with younger girls in the system, helping them navigate school challenges, family issues, and the emotional complexities of foster care. Her natural empathy and her lived experience made her an incredibly effective mentor, and the foundation's staff frequently marveled at her maturity and insight. Carmen has a gift for connecting with kids who have experienced trauma, the program coordinator told Pete during a staff meeting. She doesn't judge, doesn't pity, doesn't try to fix everything. She just listens and shares her own journey. It's exactly what these kids need. Malcolm, who had lost 60 pounds through the baseball program and continued training, was invited to speak at local schools about overcoming obstacles and building self-confidence. His transformation from an overweight, self-conscious teenager to a confident young athlete inspired other children struggling with similar issues. I used to think my weight defined me, Malcolm told an assembly at his high school. I thought it meant I was lazy, worthless, incapable of achieving anything. But baseball taught me that who you are isn't determined by where you start. It's determined by how hard you're willing to work to get where you want to go. Pete Rose didn't look at me and see a fat kid. He saw potential, and that changed everything. Even little Tommy, now 9 years old and one of the fastest players in the Youth Baseball League, had become something of a local celebrity. His hustle on the base paths and his infectious enthusiasm had made him a fan favorite. Local sports reporters occasionally interviewed him, and he always credited Pete and the St. Catherine's program for his success. But it was the quieter transformations, the ones that didn't make headlines, that Pete found most meaningful. A shy 12-year-old girl named Maria, who had barely spoken when she first joined the program, was now confidently leading stretching exercises for her team. A 15-year-old boy named Jason, who had cycled through 7 foster placements before landing at St. Catherine's, was maintaining a 3.5 GPA and talking about becoming an engineer. A 10-year-old named Devon was writing poetry about his experiences and dreaming of becoming a writer. The program was creating pathways to success for children who had previously seen only dead ends. In August, as Marcus prepared to begin his final year of high school, Pete sat down with him for one of their regular Thursday evening meetings at the diner. But this time, Pete had brought someone with him, a woman in her early 50s with short gray hair and an easy smile. "Marcus, this is Jennifer Holloway," Pete said. "She's the director of athletics at Xavier University." Marcus shook her hand, suddenly nervous. He knew that his scholarship to Xavier was contingent on completing high school successfully, but he hadn't expected to meet with university officials until closer to graduation. "Relax," Jennifer said warmly, reading his anxiety. "You're not in trouble. Actually, I wanted to meet you because we've been following your work with the foundation this summer. Marcus, your coaching skills are impressive, but what really stands out is your ability to connect with young people who come from difficult backgrounds. That's a rare gift." Marcus relaxed slightly. "Thank you, Mom. I just tried to remember what it felt like when I was younger and scared about my future. If I can help other kids avoid some of that fear, that's what I want to do." Jennifer nodded. "That's exactly the kind of educator we want in our program. But I wanted to discuss something with you. Have you thought about what you want to focus on within education? Teaching, counseling, administration?" "Coaching," Marcus answered immediately. "Specifically, coaching kids from at-risk backgrounds, using sports to teach life skills, build confidence, create opportunities. Basically what Pete has done for me and the others at St. Catherine's." "That's what I thought," Jennifer said, pulling out a folder. "Marcus, we're creating a new track within our education program, Athletic Development for At-Risk Youth. It combines traditional education coursework with specialized training in sports psychology, youth development, trauma-informed coaching, and program administration. It's being funded by a grant specifically designed to train educators who can work effectively with disadvantaged populations. We'd like you to be one of the first students in this program." Marcus looked at Pete, then back at Jennifer. "I'm already getting a full scholarship for the regular education program. This sounds even more intensive." "It is more intensive," Jennifer confirmed, "but the grant covers everything. Plus, you'd have access to additional resources, internship placements with professional sports organizations, conferences, networking opportunities with leaders in the field of youth athletics. Basically, we're going to train you to become not just a coach, but a program director and youth development specialist." Marcus felt overwhelmed. "Why me? I'm just a kid from an orphanage who happened to get lucky." Pete leaned forward. Marcus, you're not lucky. You're talented, hardworking, and you have authentic passion for helping others. That's not luck, that's character. And Jennifer isn't offering you this opportunity out of charity. She's offering it because she recognizes that you have the potential to become a leader in this field. The question is, are you willing to do the work? Marcus thought about all the children he had worked with over the summer. Kids who reminded him of himself just a year ago, scared and directionless. He thought about the Foundation's mission to expand programs across the country. He thought about the ripple effect that Pete's simple act of kindness had created in his own life. Yes, Marcus said firmly, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Thank you for this opportunity. Good, Jennifer said, extending her hand again. I'll have the program coordinator contact you with details. We expect great things from you, Marcus. After Jennifer left, Pete and Marcus sat in silence for a moment, both processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Pete, I need to ask you something, Marcus finally said. Why are you doing all of this? I mean, I understand the baseball program, the foundation. You want to help kids. But the level of personal involvement, the connections you're making for me specifically, the time you're investing, why? Pete was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer carefully. You remember that first day I came to St. Catherine's? I told Sister Margaret I'd been thinking about legacy, about what matters beyond statistics and records. Marcus nodded. The truth is, I was feeling empty, Pete continued. I had achieved everything I'd set out to achieve in baseball. I had the records, the championships, the fame. But when I really examined my life, I realized I hadn't done much that actually helped anyone. I had lived for myself, for my career, for my own glory, and that started to feel hollow. He paused, stirring his coffee. Then I drove past St. Catherine's that morning and something just clicked. I saw those kids playing in the courtyard, and I thought about all the advantages I'd had growing up. Parents who supported my dreams, access to equipment and coaching, opportunities to develop my skills. You and those other kids deserved those same advantages. And I had the resources to provide them, so I guess the answer to your question is, I'm doing this because I finally found something worth doing. You kids have given my life meaning beyond baseball. You've shown me that the most important records aren't in books. They're the lives we touch and the futures we help create. Marcus felt tears forming. Well, you've definitely created a future for me. And for Carmen, Malcolm, Tommy, and so many others. We won't forget that. I know you won't, Pete said. And Marcus, you're going to create futures for hundreds, maybe thousands of other kids over your lifetime. That's how the ripple effect works. One person helps another, who helps another, and suddenly you've changed the world. As August turned to September and Marcus began his senior year, the foundation continued to expand. The Cincinnati Reds organization formalized its partnership, providing funding and stadium access for all of the foundation's teams. Other professional athletes, inspired by Pete's example, joined as supporters and volunteers. A former NFL player started a football program modeled on the baseball initiative. A retired Olympic gymnast launched a gymnastics program for girls in foster care. The media attention intensified. National sports networks ran features on the Charlie Hustle Foundation. Pete was invited to speak at conferences about youth development and the power of sports to transform lives. He was approached by organizations in other cities wanting to replicate the model. Through it all, Pete remained focused on the children at St. Catherine's, his original team. He still showed up every Saturday for practice, still attended their games, still had dinner with Marcus every Thursday evening. Despite the growth and the publicity, he never lost sight of why he had started down this path. In October, exactly 1 year after Pete had first walked through the doors of St. Catherine's, the foundation organized an anniversary celebration at the orphanage. Over 200 people attended. Foundation staff, volunteers, donors, current and former program participants, community leaders, and media representatives. Pete stood at a microphone in the courtyard, looking out at the crowd. The same courtyard where a year ago he had first distributed baseball equipment to a group of excited children. Now that courtyard was filled with people whose lives had been touched by what had started as a spontaneous act of generosity. A year ago today, I drove past this building and made a split-second decision to stop in, Pete began. I didn't have a plan, didn't have a vision for a foundation or a comprehensive youth development program. I just felt like I should meet the kids who lived here. That one decision changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. He gestured toward Marcus, Carmen, Malcolm, and the other original Cardinals, who stood together near the front of the crowd. These young people taught me that talent and potential exist everywhere, in orphanages, in underfunded schools, in communities that society often overlooks. The difference between potential fulfilled and potential wasted is simply opportunity. When we invest in young people, when we believe in them and provide them with resources and support, there's no limit to what they can achieve. Sister Margaret stepped forward to join Pete at the microphone. 1 year ago, this orphanage was a place where children were safe, fed and educated, but where hope was often in short supply. Today, it's a place where dreams are cultivated, where young people learn they can achieve extraordinary things. That transformation is entirely due to Pete Rose and the incredible team of people he's assembled. On behalf of every child who has been touched by this program, thank you. The crowd erupted in applause. Pete looked out at the faces, the children who had been transformed, the volunteers who had given their time, the donors who had provided resources, the staff who had worked tirelessly to build something meaningful. He thought about Marcus heading to Xavier in less than a year, about Carmen's plans to study social work, about Malcolm's dreams of sports medicine, about Tommy's speed and enthusiasm on the baseball diamond. He thought about the ripple effect, how his decision to stop at St. Catherine's that October morning had created waves that extended far beyond what he could have imagined. How Marcus would someday coach his own teams and influence his own players. How Carmen would help countless families navigate difficult circumstances. How each child touched by the program would carry forward the lessons they had learned and pass them on to others. Later that evening, after the celebration had ended and most people had gone home, Pete found Marcus sitting alone on the front steps of St. Catherine's, looking up at the stars. "Big day," Pete said, sitting down beside him. "Big year," Marcus corrected. "Pete, I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about opportunity being the difference between potential fulfilled and potential wasted. Do you know how many kids are out there right now, sitting in orphanages or group homes or foster placements, who have the same potential I had, who are just waiting for someone to give them a chance?" "Thousands," Pete said. "Probably hundreds of thousands. And we're only reaching a tiny fraction of them," Marcus continued. "The foundation is doing amazing work, but there are so many more kids who need help. How do we scale this? How do we reach everyone who needs this?" Pete smiled. Marcus was already thinking like a program director, seeing not just individual lives, but systemic challenges. "We can't reach everyone, Marcus. No single organization can. But we can train others to do this work. We can share what we've learned, create models that other communities can replicate, train coaches and educators who will go on to start their own programs. That's how real change happens, not through one person or one organization, but through a movement of people all working toward the same goal." "Then that's what I want to do," Marcus said firmly. "After college, after I get my education degree, I want to work in program development and training. I want to help create programs like this all over the country. I want to make sure that kids who grow up the way I did have access to the same opportunities I've had." "You'll do exactly that," Pete said confidently. "And Marcus, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when you're running a national organization and training coaches across the country, remember this moment. Remember sitting on these steps. Remember the kids you've worked with this year. Remember what it felt like to receive help when you needed it most. Stay connected to that, and you'll never lose sight of why the work matters." "I won't forget," Marcus promised. "How could I? This place, these people, you all saved my life. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure other kids get the same chance I got." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the city around them. Distant traffic, someone's radio playing music, the wind rustling through the oak trees on the street. The same street where 1 year ago, Pete's Lincoln Continental had pulled up to the curb and changed everything. "Pete," Marcus said quietly, "I know you always say you're not doing this for thanks, but I need you to understand something. You literally changed the trajectory of my life. A year ago, I was counting down the days until I aged out of this place, terrified about what would happen to me. Now I'm preparing for college, I have a career path, I have purpose and direction. That's because of you. I don't know how I can ever repay that." "You don't repay it," Pete said. "You pay it forward. You take what you've learned and you help the next kid who needs it. Then that kid helps someone else. That's how we change the world, Marcus. One person at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one opportunity at a time." As winter approached and Marcus's senior year continued, the foundation's work expanded even further. Programs were established in 3 other Ohio cities: Cleveland, Columbus, and Toledo. The model was being studied by youth development organizations across the country. Pete was invited to testify before a state legislative committee about the importance of funding athletics programs for at-risk youth. But the most meaningful moment still happened at St. Catherine's, in the small daily interactions between Pete and the children, teaching a nervous 8-year-old how to field a ground ball, helping a struggling 13-year-old with homework, attending a 15-year-old's school play, being present consistently in ways these children had rarely experienced. In March of Marcus's senior year, college acceptance letters began arriving. In addition to Xavier's scholarship, Marcus received offers from 3 other universities, all of them including full financial support. He had become exactly what Dr. Chen had predicted, a compelling candidate whose personal story, academic achievement, and demonstrated leadership made him attractive to multiple programs. Marcus chose Xavier, wanting to stay close to St. Catherine's and the foundation. "This is where I'm needed," he told Pete. "These kids, this community, this is my home. I want to build my career here." In April, the Cardinals played their second annual game at Riverfront Stadium, now Great American Ballpark, as the stadium had been recently renamed and renovated. They won this time 9-4, and the crowd was even larger than the previous year. Marcus, in his final game before graduating high school, went 3 for 4 with 2 doubles and 4 RBIs. When he came to bat for the last time, the entire stadium gave him a standing ovation. Standing on second base after his final hit, Marcus looked toward the dugout where Pete stood, arms folded, that familiar slight smile on his face. Their eyes met, and in that moment, no words were needed. Everything they had been through together, every practice, every game, every conversation, every lesson, was contained in that exchange. After the game, as the team celebrated in the clubhouse, Pete pulled Marcus aside one final time. "This is your last game as a St. Catherine's Cardinal," Pete said, "but it's just the beginning of your baseball journey. At Xavier, you'll play on their club team while you study. You'll coach youth teams through the foundation. And someday, you'll lead your own program. I can't wait to see where this journey takes you. Wherever it takes me, it started here," Marcus said. "With you, with this team, with this program. I'll carry St. Catherine's with me forever." In May, Marcus graduated as valedictorian of his high school class. His speech, delivered to a packed auditorium, focused on the power of belief, how one person believing in you can change your entire life trajectory. "A year and a half ago, I was invisible," Marcus told the audience. "I was just another foster kid, another statistic, another young person society had written off. Then Pete Rose walked into my life and saw something I couldn't see in myself. He saw potential. He saw possibility. He believed I was worth investing in. That belief changed everything." He paused, looking out at the crowd. "We all have the power to be that person for someone else. We all can choose to see potential instead of problems, possibility instead of limitations. We can choose to invest our time, our energy, our resources in lifting others up. That's what Pete taught me. That's what the Charlie Hustle Foundation is built on. And that's what I'm going to dedicate my life to, being for other kids what Pete was for me." The audience rose in standing ovation. In the front row, Pete wiped tears from his eyes. That summer, before starting at Xavier in the fall, Marcus worked full-time at the foundation, now as a paid program coordinator rather than an intern. He designed training materials for volunteer coaches, developed curriculum for youth development workshops, and spoke at foundation events across Ohio. Carmen, now 14, continued her mentorship work and began taking leadership roles within the foundation's programming. She ran workshops on emotional resilience for younger girls in the system and was being featured in foundation materials as a youth ambassador. Malcolm enrolled in a community college program focusing on exercise science and sports medicine, his grades good enough to earn partial scholarships despite having struggled academically throughout his childhood. Tommy, now 10, was being recruited by elite youth baseball programs and was regularly featured in local sports coverage as one of the most promising young players in Cincinnati. And dozens of other children, some whose names Pete knew well, others he had only met briefly, were finding their own paths forward, carrying with them the lessons learned through the foundation's programs. In August, the week before Marcus was scheduled to move into his Xavier dormitory, Pete hosted a small dinner at his home for Marcus, Carmen, Malcolm, and a few of the other original Cardinals. They sat around his dining room table, sharing memories and stories from the past 2 years. "Remember Marcus's first coaching session?" Carmen said, laughing. "He was so nervous he accidentally told James to throw with his wrong hand." Everyone laughed, including Marcus. "I was terrified. I had no idea what I was doing." "You figured it out pretty quickly," Pete said. "You had the instincts, you just needed the confidence. Now look at you, about to start college, already working as a program coordinator, teaching others how to coach. You've come a long way, Marcus." "We all have," Malcolm added. 2 years ago, I couldn't run around the bases without getting winded. Now I'm studying to become a sports medicine professional. That's crazy." "It's not crazy," Pete said firmly. "It's what happens when talented people get the opportunities they deserve. You all had the potential before I showed up. I just helped clear some obstacles and provided some resources. Everything you've achieved, you achieved through your own hard work and determination. But we wouldn't have had the chance without you," Carmen said. "That's the point, Pete. Potential means nothing if there's no opportunity to develop it. You gave us that opportunity. You gave us hope." As the evening wound down and the young people prepared to leave, Pete gathered them together one final time. "I want you all to promise me something," he said. "Promise me that no matter where life takes you, no matter how successful you become, you'll remember where you came from. Remember the kids who are still at St. Catherine's and places like it. Remember that there are talented young people everywhere who just need someone to believe in them. And when you have the chance, be that someone for another kid. Be the person who walks through their door and changes their life. That's how we create lasting change, by paying forward the help we've received. "We promise," they said in unison. 2 years after Pete Rose had walked unannounced into St. Catherine's Home for Children, the gift he had left behind had grown beyond anything he could have imagined. The Charlie Hustle Foundation was serving over 300 at-risk youth across Ohio. The model was being replicated in 6 other states. Thousands of people had been trained as volunteer coaches and mentors. Millions of dollars had been raised to support programming. But more importantly, lives had been transformed. Marcus Washington was heading to college with a clear purpose and a bright future. Carmen Rodriguez was well on her way to becoming the social worker she had dreamed of being. Malcolm Rivers had lost 80 pounds and found his passion in sports medicine. Tommy O'Connor was becoming a star athlete while maintaining excellent grades, and hundreds of other children whose names weren't in newspaper articles, whose stories weren't featured in foundation materials, were also finding their way forward, one practice at a time, one game at a time, one act of belief at a time. On a warm September evening, Pete stood alone in the courtyard at St. Catherine's, looking up at the building where this unexpected journey had begun. The courtyard had been renovated with foundation funds, new basketball hoops, a batting cage, fresh paint, benches where children could sit and talk. But the basic structure remained the same, still holding its decades of history. Sister Margaret joined him, standing silently beside him for a moment before speaking. "You know, when you first walked through that door 2 years ago, I thought you were just a celebrity looking for a photo opportunity," she said. Pete chuckled. "You've mentioned that before." "I was wrong about you," Sister Margaret continued. "You weren't looking for publicity or praise. You were looking for purpose, and you found it here, with these children." "They found me," Pete corrected. "I was just driving past, Sister. I almost didn't stop. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I just kept driving that morning." "But you didn't," Sister Margaret said firmly. "You stopped. You came in. You stayed. And because of that, dozens of children have futures they wouldn't have had otherwise. That's not luck or coincidence, Pete. That's providence." Pete nodded slowly. "Maybe you're right. All I know is that these past 2 years have been the most meaningful of my life. More meaningful than any game I ever played, any record I ever broke, any championship I ever won. These kids taught me what really matters. And you taught them that they matter," Sister Margaret replied. "That's the greatest gift you could have given them." As the sun set over Cincinnati, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Pete thought about the ripple effect. How one decision, one moment of compassion, one act of generosity could cascade through countless lives across years and decades. How Marcus would someday coach his own teams and inspire his own players. How those players would carry forward the lessons they learned. How the effect would multiply and spread, touching people Pete would never meet, in places he would never visit, long after he was gone. That was the real gift he had left at St. Catherine's. Not baseball equipment or scholarships or even opportunities, but the understanding that every person has value, that circumstances don't determine destiny, and that when we invest in each other, we create possibilities that extend far beyond anything we can measure or predict. Pete Rose had walked into an orphanage unannounced, carrying nothing but a willingness to help, and that simple act of kindness had changed the world. One child at a time, one opportunity at a time, one life at a time. Because that's how transformation happens. Not through grand gestures or elaborate plans, but through someone showing up, being present, and believing that every person, especially those society has overlooked, deserves a chance to discover their potential and pursue their dreams. And as the evening stars began to appear over Cincinnati, the children of St. Catherine's, past, present, and future, carried forward the legacy of the man who had cared enough to stop, to see, and to act. The gift Pete Rose left behind was hope. And hope, it turned out, was priceless.